early winter's day.
Frosty.
Are we Chris? Sorry, are we winter or are we autumn at the moment? I never know.
Well, I think it should be winter by now, shouldn't it?
I know.
It's Thanksgiving in America. It should be winter, I think.
I mean, the sun, all that.
But of course, we should think also of the poor people who haven't got their winter fuel allowance anymore.
Absolutely.
Because it's going to be chilly for them. They won't be putting the heating on.
There's a legal case about to go to the courts on this, by a trade union. We do everything in the courts now. Migration, you name it. Chagos, we're going to be talking about it on the show.
Women, everything.
Women. We talk about women.
Julia Hartley-Brewer, let's talk about women. There's a woman coming on the show. I'm going to be back tomorrow as a man.
Smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Pleasure to have your company, whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device. It is great that you can join us today. I said, beautiful. This is a perfect sort of, can't decide with Mike, is it autumnal winter's day? I know there's some technicality of when we hit winter, but it feels absolutely beautiful today. A bit cold, a bit chilly, but, nice to have the blue skies. It does make a difference to the day. And no doubt you have been cheered by the latest figures that came out in the last half hour, which Mike would have mentioned. The net migration figures to the UK, they've fallen by 20%. Isn't that good news? Because I think most of us who are sane realise that actually uncontrolled mass immigration, legal or otherwise, is not actually working for this country very well. But it's fallen by 20% to 728,000 over the last year. 728,000 more people moved to this country last year than left this country. We're coping with an extra 728,000 people. That's, by the way, 20% down on the 100,000 people more who came to the country in the year to June 2023 before. We are living in a crazy, crazy world, because I don't know about you. Have you seen loads more houses being built? Have you seen all those new hospitals that have been built? All those new schools that have provided new places? The GP surgeries offering all those extra appointments? The extra doctors trained, recruited and working in our hospitals, giving operations and treatments? Have you seen all of that? Have you seen the extra buses, the extra trains, the extra roads being built to allow for all those people? Oh, yeah, and the creation of all those amazing, wonderful, high-skilled jobs for these absolutely brilliant, high-skilled people coming to our country to make a net contribution. Because I must have missed that. I pay quite a lot of attention to the news, because of the job, and I find it quite interesting anyway. But I must have missed all of those stories about all of that increase in our public infrastructure. Just must have just completely passed my notice, because this is the thing. How on earth can we possibly accommodate effectively a large city's worth of new people every single year? And it is every single year. Well, I suppose the key answer is we can't. We don't. And that's why it's an issue. And that's why, certainly, I welcome Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative leader, yesterday, in her first major policy speech yesterday, talking about how she will want to bring in a cap, an annual cap on migration. And that is what I want to ask you about today. So do get in touch about that. I'll give you the number in just a few moments. She said we need to stop being squeamish about the negative impacts of mass immigration and also that Britain is not a hotel, it's our home. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Plus, I'm going to talk about the Chagos Islands. They keep coming into the news. I think most of us had never heard of them until a month or so ago, had we not? But Keir Starmer's deal to hand over the Chagos Islands to Mauritius may be about to collapse after allies of Donald Trump, the incoming US president, and the new Mauritian Prime Minister publicly rejected the deal. So what's going on there? We'll talk to experts about that. And the assisted dying bill comes up for a vote, or debate, 5 hours, then a vote in Parliament tomorrow. And the former Prime Minister, Lord Cameron, is the first former PM to weigh in to say he has changed his mind and now supports the bill to legalise assisted dying. He says it would help bring about a meaningful reduction in human suffering. Also, let's talk about the blasphemy laws as well, because we abolished those quite some time ago. But Conservatives have warned against blasphemy laws being brought back in after a Labour MP at the PMQs yesterday called on Keir Starmer to legally ban the desecration of religious texts and prophets of Christianity, Islam and Judaism. And the Prime Minister appeared to agree with the demand, when in fact the correct answer should have been no. We'll talk about all of that here at the home of Common Sense, and I know we're going to get plenty of common sense from my guest today, Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer. Very good morning to you.
Common sense?
Common sense.
Oh my God, I've left it in my bag.
Might be an outbreak. I don't think you can. I think it's imbued in your DNA, which is why we love having you on the show. There's a lot of deep sighing today. I mean, generally, there's going to be a big hailing of 20% fall in net migration. Oh, isn't that wonderful? Now, part of this, by the way, is down to the fact that we had changes to the number of students who were allowed to bring dependents with them. So since January, most students have not been allowed to bring dependents with them unless they're studying at PhD level. So basically, we had a huge... It's particularly Nigeria. People were bringing, 4 or 5 or 6 dependents and coming as a student. I mean, really? On what planet did we think that was viable economically? But also... And get this a decision by the previous Conservative government. This entirely covers the period of the Conservative government. They raised the minimum salary requirement for skilled worker visas from 26 grand to 38 grand. Now, that was announced in April, but actually that hasn't actually been brought in yet. That hasn't actually happened yet. So perhaps we would have seen a bigger fall if that were the case. But I mean, a 20% fall to 728,000 people coming in net. That's it's more than 1 million who come in. It's just the net amount of people more in the country. Yeah. That is still absolutely huge number.
It is, and our infrastructure's creaking, can't handle it. Now, for those migrants that come in that contribute to society and pay taxes and are earning above certain thresholds and contribute to the country, doctors and other bits and pieces. My cancer surgeon had come from an immigrant family. The assistant surgeon come from an immigrant family. My father was looked after by immigrants when he was in his care home. They're adding to society because there's work-shy Brits don't want to go and do that or train for that. But the dependents, the huge numbers that are there, the illegal migrants are a net burden on society because we're having to pay for them because they're not going out and contributing.
No, I think you'll find if you check at any Islington dinner party, you will find, Philip, because they've been telling us this, the great and the good. By the way, Conservatives and Labour and Lib Dems and all the rest of them, for years, that net migration is a good thing for the country. Every committee, every report says, all the advisory bodies say they've been a net contributor, because apparently everyone's a high-earning engineer, as opposed to someone earning minimum wage as a care worker or driving an Uber or working in a factory. Now, I've got no issue with people coming to this country legally to make a better life for themselves and their family. All credit to them. I mean, you know, you've got gumption, you know, absolutely. But the key thing is, although that may benefit your family, the key thing is when our immigration policy should be made around the people who are already here, which, by the way, will include many recent legal immigrants and people who are the descendants of immigrants, who actually at the bottom of the economic pile are the people who are most hit. I'm largely, and you largely, a lot of our audience maybe, not really hit by someone who arrives from whether it's Slovakia or Nigeria or Pakistan. That someone arriving in the country today is probably not going to take our job. We're not going to be competing with them. But millions of people are, and for housing and school places and hospital appointments and all of that. And so many of the people who support this policy are people who basically aren't impacted by it. They think, well, it's wonderful, got a lovely deli at the end of the road. Isn't it lovely? And now we celebrate Diwali at my daughter's primary school or things like that. They're completely and utterly out of touch with the actual impact, but also not just the economic impact, because the vast majority of immigrants actually are not earning. And certainly from many countries. And if you look at it by country, and again, some countries are now publishing this information, either criminality or net economic contribution. And it's vastly different for the average person from different countries. And what a surprise. People coming from, say, America and Canada and France and Germany, you know, are massive net contributors. They're bankers and doctors and goodness knows what. And people coming from the Indian subcontinent and from sub-Saharan Africa, funnily enough, and this is going to blow your minds, everybody, on average are not highly skilled. On average, there'll be plenty of people who are skilled, who bring their skills and what. But again, even when we say, well, how will our NHS cope? Well, you know what? I'm really sorry, but like, we can train up our own people to be doctors and nurses, because there are thousands upon thousands every year who don't get into medical school with straight A's in science and maths who can't get into medical school because we limit the number of people we train. Yeah,
well, exactly. And there's lots could be done to get more people trained in medical areas and other areas where we're short. You know, take away student loan requirement, for student fees requirement for people studying
subjects that are useful,
that are very useful to society.
But we won't give you any money, and we'll charge you double if you're doing media studies.
Well, exactly. But you know, these are the sorts of things that the government should be doing to reduce it. And you know, the statistics should look at those that are the contributors and those that aren't the contributors, and start to cut the contributors out, but also put a number of other barriers in place.
I would say there are some countries which we should simply say, I'm not sure that on average. I think we should have higher requirements from certain countries. I really do.
There is with certain countries, but I think we should bring other things in, like language tests, so that you if you come in as an immigrant, if you cannot speak English and you have to pass quite a sophisticated test, oral and written, within 2 years, then you lose your...
Not even within 2 years.
Well,
no, but that's the thing. Like, what job are you doing? What job, realistically, are you doing in this country that makes you a net contributor?
You're right.
By the way, you need to be earning over 40k to be doing that. Yeah. What job are you doing when you don't speak the language?
Yes.
Now, I don't know, maybe you're some internet entrepreneur, maybe you're some Arab prince or something, and you don't have to speak the language because you're so rich. Fine, as long as you're paying taxes here, I'm not bothered. You can't be a drain on society. And the reality is, everyone's been saying that. And also, something Kemi Badenoch addressed in her major policy speech, the first one she's done as leader of the Conservatives yesterday, was, you know, talking about how Britain is not a hotel, it's our home, and talking about the lack of integration. And this is something that people talk about, multicultural Britain. I don't want Britain to be multicultural. I'm quite happy for Britain to be multiracial. We're a very welcoming country. I couldn't give two hoots what colour your skin is. It's totally irrelevant to every aspect of your and my lives, in my view. Well, it should be. That was where we should get to. But multicultural, no. You want to come to Britain, you adopt our culture.
Yes.
That's the deal.
Yeah.
That is the deal, and that comes down to everything in terms of tolerance of, you know, other religious beliefs, freedom of speech, tolerate women's rights, equality, the right to marry out of your religion, to leave your religion, and I'm sorry, we have whole swathes of the population now who simply do not accept many British fundamental cultural values and beliefs. And I'm sorry, that's got to stop. People living side by side. So people say, oh, Birmingham, wonderful multicultural part of the world. London, wonderful. No, you've got an enclave. You've got Afro-Caribbean, you've got Turkish, you've got Bangladeshi, you've got Pakistani, you've got Indian, you've got... People are not mixing. Yeah. They're not integrating. They're not assimilating. And that's not good for anyone.
And that's... I've looked at why the US doesn't have overtly such a problem.
They don't.
It does covertly, but overtly, if you ask someone in America, no matter what their skin colour is, where they've come from and all the rest of it, you say, what nationality are they? They say, I'm American first.
Yeah.
If you ask someone in the UK from different, what nationality are you? They will say, I'm Bangladeshi, or I'm Nigerian, or I'm such and such. They won't say, I'm British first.
Yeah.
And the Americans, they swear the allegiance to the flag in the schools every morning.
Listen, I went to school in America for 2 years as a kid. We had to sing the national anthem, swear allegiance to the flag every single morning. And again, you're an Italian American, a Polish American, Irish American, but you're American. But again, that is a melting pot country. Also, crucially, it's got a growing economy. It's a huge country. Yeah. It's a country that is built on immigration. Yes. And people say, so is our country. No, it's not. Yeah. No, it's not. 90+% of the country have origins tracing back, hundreds and hundreds of years in this country. It's not. We are not built on immigration. That is not our culture.
The French are the Celts. That's our background.
I mean, I know it's quite bizarre. People don't understand our basic history. And again, welcoming people who come here want to make a contribution, but again, this nonsense. I do hate this. It's about Caribbean people coming here. It's about wanting to help us build the NHS. No, they came for a better life. They're living in mud shacks. Yeah. In god-awful, beautiful Paradise Island to us, but actually, if you look at the way a lot of people were living, coming here to make a new life for themselves and their children, and that's great. But they were being paid to do a job that British people wouldn't do. Yep. So a crucial thing is here, we need to make sure that British people are willing to do a lot of these jobs. Now, part of that is increasing the pay.
Yes.
At the end of the day, if someone won't do a job, remember during lockdown, they couldn't get enough lorry drivers. Well, you know what? If you pay people enough, they'll do it. Yeah. We need to pay people more to do a lot of these jobs.
But we also need to disincentivise not working. Because too many people sit there and will play the benefit game and go, it's too expensive for me to go to work. I'll lose all these benefits. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Shouldn't be an option.
If there's a job there, you have to take that. Otherwise, you lose your benefits.
Absolutely. We talked about that on the show all this week as well. Yeah. Well, look, I want to hear from you. Do get in touch. 0344 499 1000. That's the number to call. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch says Britain is not a hotel, it's our home, as she pledges to bring in an annual cap on visas. What's your reaction to that, especially with the news that we're now see a 20% fall? Yippity-doo-dah, well done everyone, to 728,000 net migrants arriving in the country last year. And that is due to some Tory policies brought in, nothing to do with Labour, of course, but it's still sky high. Do you remember the tens of thousands? Remember, we were going to have a cap in 2010. Exactly, it's been reiterated at every single election, bringing migration to tens of thousands. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to see that happen.
Well, 700,000 is a multiple of tens of thousands. It's a very big multiple.
On a technicality.
On a technicality, exactly. It is.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Say, get in touch. 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk to 87222. You can get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Let's also talk about the Chagos Islands, because look, when this story first broke, annoyingly, you weren't in the studio. And as I said on air, because I'm very open about these things, right, we're going to go to a break. Chagos Islands are going to be handed to Mauritius by the Brits. We're going to Google where the Chagos Islands are and what the significance is. Now, we all know, in the middle of the Pacific, hugely important. That is, one of the islands is Diego Garcia, which is where we have a huge military base for the United States. Huge number of military sorties have been flown from that base involving the Middle East. So it's absolutely vitally important. Sort of out of the blue, I think, for most of us, although Tories had been in talks for some time with the Mauritians, we've decided to hand the Chagos Islands over to Mauritius. Not hand them back. Mauritius has never owned the Chagos Islands. It's utterly bizarre. What no one can work out is why we're doing it, why a 100-year lease for the US naval base makes that OK, because I'm not entirely sure that the Mauritians, who are totally in hock to the Chinese government, will not try and undermine that. But crucially, we're now told it's now looking like it might not happen, because not only do we have a new Mauritian Prime Minister who has said this is a betrayal and he doesn't support this publicly, privately apparently has said something else. We've also got Donald Trump as the new US President-elect, and his people are saying, no way are you handing them over to the Mauritians. What is going on behind the scenes, Philip?
Oh, it's shocking. Historically, the French used to own it until 1814. 1814, the Treaty of Paris, it was passed to UK control. It is 7 atolls, 60 islands, about
middle of nowhere.
310 miles south of the Maldives.
Yeah.
Good place to go on holiday. Well, not, because there was nuclear tests in the area, and it's a big US base.
Bring us down on a nice sunny morning.
It's a strategic US base, not just as an Air Force base, but also for intelligence gathering in the whole region, the whole area. So, giving it to Mauritius, who've never quite owned it. The French owned it whenever they owned Mauritius, but that disappeared. But
either way, it's just like, why out of the blue is this sort of happening?
Well, it came on the back of an international criminal court, an ICJ ruling in 2019, turning around and giving an advisory that the Chagos Islands should be handed back to the Chagos people.
Who apparently thought they wanted to be ruled by Mauritius.
And to Mauritius. But it was an advisory. It was something that the previous government was looking at, was doing everything politically to stall doing anything. There was no compulsion to do it whatsoever.
But within weeks of Keir Starmer getting to power, this seemed to have been signed off.
October the 24th, he signed it off.
How is this a priority when all the things that are going on, not just domestically, but abroad as well? What are the chances this deal will fall before January the 20th, when, of course, there has to be agreement from the US, although they don't have any say in the actual legals on this, the practicalities of their naval base? Do you think that actually, there's lots of talk about Keir Starmer's trying to get this off the books and get it done before Donald Trump takes power?
Well, he has to get it ratified with the UK Parliament, and I think if you look at the timeline with Christmas in the middle and all the rest of it, the chances of him getting parliamentary time to get that through a vote before Donald Trump was sworn in is virtually nil.
The government can make any parliamentary time they want, can't they?
They can, but he will bring it more up into the public domain and be attacked more by it if he tries to.
I just don't understand why he wants to do this, unless it's some weird bleeding heart liberal,
Well, that's the only reason why I can think
sort
there
of
is
hand-wringing
it.
exercise.
If the ICJ says this should be an advisory, we're going to follow the ICJ rules, just do everything that they say. International Court of Justice, and that's the only. It's not logic. That's the only reason behind it. There's no logic to this whatsoever, and actually it will undermine our position, and trying to force it will undermine our starting position with the new Trump.
Yep. Which might be a silly thing to do in these rather difficult economic and security times. Lovely to talk to you about that. I'd love to get more of people's views on that, actually. What on earth's going on there? Do give us a call on that. Any of the stories we're talking about, I do still want to talk about blasphemy laws and assisted dying and Al Fayed and the investigations by the police into those people surrounding him. I mean, basically everyone knew that he was raping and sexually abusing women, and it turns out girls as well. And bizarrely, no one stopped it. In fact, people were basically working to help him do it. As is often the case, Jimmy Savile, here we are again. So much more to talk about. I'd welcome your thoughts on anything we're talking about. 0344 499 1000, but in particular on the latest migrant figures and what Kemi Badenoch had to say about an annual cap on visas. Do get in touch. 10:22 is the time. This is Talk.
the car industry is facing a crunch which was utterly foreseeable a year ago when this zero-emission vehicle mandate came into being, requiring 22% of cars sold this year to be pure electric, or otherwise manufacturers face a £15,000 fine for each vehicle over the limit. Well, up until the end of October, only 18% of cars sold were pure electric, and that's been the situation for about 3 years now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram is still with me, and lots of your calls coming in. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call about the net migration figures. Net migration to the UK has fallen from just frankly absurd level last year. 906,000 more people came to this country in the year to June 2023 than left this country. But don't worry, it's fallen by 20%. So now it's only in inverted commas, 728,000. I mean, it's absolutely absurd, isn't it? It's absolutely absurd. That's the number who came over last year. This, as Kemi Badenoch made her first policy speech yesterday, in which she says, as new Tory leader, that Britain is not a hotel, it's our home. She talked about how people have to stop being squeamish about talking about the impacts of immigration culturally, also economically. And she pledged to bring in an annual cap on visas, and said, actually, also, even leaving the European Convention on Human Rights wasn't the most radical thing that they could actually do. But it's a full review, full tearing up of immigration policy. I'm pretty sure a lot of us would welcome that. What's your reaction, though? Give us a call, send us a message. Let's get to some of those messages right now. Graham says, perhaps if our British homeless people could get to France, then come back on a dinghy with illegal immigrants and claim asylum, they could then immediately receive free food, get almost instant medical assistance and be warm for the winter in a hotel. This is true. Michael says, 14 years of lies under Kemi Badenoch's party's watch. Just like Labour, the Tories cannot be trusted. I would never vote for either party again. I now see reform as the country's only hope of a desperately needed reset. In fact, there's actually a Reform press conference at 11 o'clock. We think they're going to be announcing their membership is now topping 100,000 members. So they'll be put, I think that's up there almost with where the Tory membership is. Andrew says, Tories had 5 years to bring in the Aussie-style points-based immigration system and stop the boats. Just one check of the same uni-party derriere. Never, ever trust a Tory again. And Brenda says it only took 20 years to notice, and they still can't stop a rubber boat. Go figure. But of course, it depends. Immigration, legal and illegal, very different things. It's important to separate those two. Let's go to the phone lines. Let's go to David. He is in London. Hello, David.
Oh, good morning.
Good morning.
How many years are we going to be talking about this?
Oh, God. Forever.
Oh, let me just quickly say that not everybody seems to pick this up. Sweden have now turned around their immigration. They've now got a net reduction. Net reduction going into Sweden. They've realised they made awful errors some 2 or 3 years ago, whenever it was. They had terrible crimes.
Well, 2015 onwards, they did the same as Angela Merkel's Germany and said, yeah, come on in, because they're so liberal and lovely.
They now realise they've made a terrible error, and my understanding, I looked at something the other day, they've now turned the figures around, they've now got a net reduction. And basically what we need, your lady on there, Renee, who's with David Ball, she said...
Renee, yeah,
some time ago, she said, we need a total moratorium for, I don't know, say a couple of years while we sort this mess out. It is a total mess.
I'm getting to the point where actually I think we need to say maybe some people we don't want to stay.
Well, you're right, but I think that's right. We need to start deporting, but at the end of the day...
We should definitely deport illegal migrants, and at least 1.5 million people have overstayed their visas or just simply have no right to be here. We know they came. A lot of those people came here legally, but you've got no right to be here. Bye. Thanks for coming. Bye.
I look forward to hearing reforms at 11 o'clock.
Well, we shall see what they have to say. We'll certainly bring it here first. David, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Stephen. He's in Manchester. Hi, Stephen.
Oh, hello. I would like to say, Kipling said 100 years ago, men of my own stock, bitter bad they may be, but at least they hear the things I hear, and they see the things I see. And we need a demographic policy and a wake-up call, a realisation that the arguments are not solely economic. They can never be. A nation is a deeply organic, slowly growing entity. You have an ancestral base, and, you know, we're dismissing that, and we have been doing over the last 30, 40 years progressively so. We've got declining birth rates amongst the indigenous people, and whole cities have gone over to recently alien majorities. This is a recipe for the end of your culture and your history.
This is it, and a lot of people confuse that, and I don't know whether you're again, I don't think that's got anything to do with the colour of someone's skin. I think that's totally and utterly irrelevant. But culture does matter. When people arrive in a country, and partly they want to come here because of, you know, the economic hope they can have from better than their country, but also the freedoms that come with our sort of Western liberal culture. But if they don't adopt Western liberal culture and don't say, right, I'm fully embracing these views, then you know, then we have an issue. And we are particularly seeing that from certain groups. And everyone's going to tiptoe around it, but we have a particular issue with some people coming from staunchly Muslim countries. People who there are plenty of Muslims in this country, absolutely law-abiding, peaceful. I'm not in any way attacking people who are Muslim. But we do have an awful lot of people who are not integrating because of coming from a culture which is not encouraging that integration. Whereas we're not seeing that issue from many other groups of people from other countries that are not Muslim majority. I'm trying to put this as carefully as I can because I think it is important to be careful about this, because this is not, you know, that awful word, Islamophobic. This is simply about needing to understand where the problem lies, and we all know where the problem lies.
Well, if you, the harsh truth, the elephant in the room, the hard truth is that this myth of grand-scale integration, good luck with that.
It's not happening.
No, it's not going to happen, particularly with the pace of change, the huge numbers pouring in, the collapse of our own demographic. You may be facing in to the beginning of the end of the British story.
Yeah, I don't think that is over-dramatising it, Stephen. Thank you for that. Philip Ingram, again, people are very uncomfortable about this. And Kemi Badenoch touched on this in her speech about people are squeamish about discussing this. But again, it's the middle classes the white middle classes are squeamish about this because they say, oh, I don't want to be branded a bigot or a racist. Well, they're the people who go around doing that. Talking about the reality of people arriving in this country who often, and particularly with women, especially in a lot of these cultures, don't integrate, don't speak English. People living, working alongside and marrying only, people within their culture, not integrating, not having any contact with the mainstream British culture at all in their daily lives. That is a sort of you've got a society inside a society rather than, and parallel societies, rather than an integrated multicultural melting pot, but we don't have that.
And this is where people aren't looking at the cultural impact of the migrants that are coming in.
Well, that's because it doesn't impact the middle classes, because they have the money to buy their way out of that.
Well, yeah, to a degree, but you know, there are cultures that will enhance and integrate as part of society and, you know, add real value and bring extra colour into society, and that is fantastic. But there's cultures or elements of cultures that come in that are culturally damaging. And we need to start look at those culturally damaging elements that are coming in.
But
and
it makes people uncomfortable.
Well, tough. You know, if you're going to make an omelette, you have to crack eggs. It's plain and simple. And look at those that are damaging us culturally overall, and then try and persuade them and give them a path to add value, or turn around and say that, I'm sorry, those practices are unacceptable.
Yeah.
Go home. go elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like, when kids in our schools are being taught about, FGM, female genital mutilation, and things like that. And so-called honour killings. I don't remember having to be warned about that in the 70s. Don't remember that ever coming up. I wonder what's changed. Yeah. Shh, shh, don't say it out loud. Shh. But we all know what's changed.
And if we find elements of that in society where people are saying, oh, this is our culture and this is what we do, you go, no, get out.
Well, exactly, and that's fine. You can have that culture, but not here. But not here. In the same way, I'm not allowed to live my culture in Saudi Arabia or Pakistan. I don't have those freedoms. Yeah. And you know why? It's why I don't live in those countries.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I don't actually like those cultures.
And therefore
because I think those cultures are inferior to Western liberal civilization.
Therefore, we need to get government to start looking at cultural impacts assessments alongside the immigration figures.
I say they buy their way out of it. They don't send their kids to those schools. They don't shop in those shops. They're not on those streets. They don't compete for the housing. They simply don't get impacted by it, and so they can easily just call everyone a bigot who says, well, actually, I'm concerned about it because there's no one at the school gate who, when I go and pick my kids up, who speaks English anymore. And that doesn't make you a bigot or a racist. That's not good for anyone. It's not good for the people who don't speak English. It's not good for the children. It's not good for social cohesion. And again, but everyone's so squeamish about it, and then people like me who talk about it, everyone goes, oh, well, you're a bigot. Oh, I'm just giving you the facts. That's just the truth. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. 10:35 is the time. Up next, going to talk to Yvonne on the fourth, the brilliant George Pascoe Watson about what is going on with politics, and this is to Dying Bill and plenty more. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. Welcome to the Home of Common Sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram's still with me. And let's speak right now to the former political editor of The Sun, and that's George Pascoe Watson, who joins us right now. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia. Hi.
Very well indeed. Nice to speak to you. Lots to talk about. Now, I remember for many years when you were Paul End of the Sun having to write about the immigration issue, massive big issue for, decades now in the political world and in the wider world as well. What do you make of the latest immigration figures? Net migration down by 20%, but still a whopping 728,000 more people came to the country than left the country last year. Kemi Badenoch's big speech saying that she would change the immigration policy. She says that we're not a hotel and we need to stop being squeamish. What do you make about that?
Well, I think the thing that your listeners will be picking up on is the number of 900,000. Yeah. That is the number of people who came additionally to our population in 2023. The fact that it's down 20% to 728,000 this year up until June is no comfort and relief to anybody who thinks that our public services, our roads, our doctors, our nurses, our NHS, our schools are already struggling to cope with the numbers that we have. And it's not a racist thing to say, as you're right to say yourself, Julia. It's a thing that concerns lots and lots of people, and it's right to concern lots and lots of people. And what it means is that, of course, for the Labour government, governing is hard. It's a lot harder when you're in control and in charge than when you're in opposition.
They definitely seem to be feeling the weight of that, don't they? It's a bit of a shock to them.
Well, I think that's right. It's a much, much harder world when you have to make tough decisions. And, this world that we're living in right now is a very hard place to govern for any party in any government in a Western democracy. And if you look at the in-tray that Keir Starmer is facing, he's got a number one priority is, of course, defence and security. He's got no money, and they're borrowing much more money than they've ever borrowed before. And there could be an inflation in the system, which would create more problems for people who've got homes with mortgages going up. Cost of living crisis could go back up again. Yeah. That's before you even think about the relationship that he wishes to form with President Trump-elect coming in January, where he wants to create a new UK-US special relationship. Why is that important? Because he desperately does not want President Trump to impose tariffs on British goods going into America, which would make it harder for British companies to export.
Well, it doesn't sound like he's going about it the right way when it comes to... look, we know we've already had a senior figure in Trump's list of appointees saying, our policies on things like net zero, impoverishing us. We're going to be going very much against the grain, not just of America, but many other countries. But also this row over the Chagos Islands and handing them to Mauritius. It's very clear from Trump's team, they're very unhappy about this. And then there's talk about Britain trying to sort of hurry through the deal with the Mauritian brand new Prime Minister before Donald Trump gets into office on the 20th of January. That is not going to curry any favours.
Well, it's not going to curry any favours. And again, it's another example of the difficulty of taking on international challenges, which matter maybe not so much to your listeners this morning in the finer detail, but it really matters in macro politics. It's about America's position in the world. It's about our relationship with America. And it's another reason why that special relationship has to be rebuilt. And so, although they're not natural bedfellows, it's very, very important for Keir Starmer to create some sort of a relationship. It is hard governing. Yeah,
that's the thing. And it's a little bit more difficult than just sort of putting out tweets and poking your finger at PMQs. What did you make of PMQs yesterday? I thought Kemi Badenoch was rather more back on her form than she has been the week before. But one of the questions she asked his time was whether he would back up Rachel Reeves' promise at the CBI earlier this week that there would be no more taxes. She said to the CBI she would not be, quote, coming back with more borrowing or more taxes. Basically, all of the hard decisions and the nasty announcements have been and gone already in this first budget, and it won't be bad again. But when she was asked whether Keir Starmer by Kemi Badenoch whether he would back with that, agree with that, he said he was not going to write the next 5 years of budgets. So we've already got a little bit of a sort of a chink of light between the Prime Minister and his Chancellor over whether or not there are more tax rises to come.
It's a hard game, this one, because it's absolutely clear to any observer who knows anything about the economy to see that it is inevitable that the Chancellor, whoever he or she might be, will have to come back for more raids on our taxes. There's no question about it. And that's not to criticise anybody, but the difficulty in politics is you want to shut down an argument in front of an audience like the CBI, You don't want people who are the business leaders and the generators of wealth and revenue in this country to feel bad about you being a chancellor. So you're going to say, I'm not going to come back for any more. I'm going to give confidence to the market that's my work here is done. But of course, if you're the Prime Minister and you are standing at the dispatch box of the House of Commons, that is a different place, because you cannot mislead MPs. That's an absolute prerequisite for governing, and therefore Keir Starmer had to sit back and say, I can't make any promises.
Well, indeed, I would like every manifesto commitment to be made at the dispatch box, so that we can hold people to account. And again, we've had that petition, haven't we? 2.8 million signatures, I think it reached, calling for another general election. You and I know that's not how governing is made, but there is actually going to be a debate in Westminster Hall about that. It's been kind of poo-pooed by Keir Starmer. But look, you and I have both been around a long time. I have never seen a government, other than we have to say with the grand exception of Liz Truss, collapse so quickly in the opinion polls. But this is straight after an election with a massive majority. I mean, I look back to what Tony Blair was doing. He was riding high at this point in 1997. What do you think that comes down to? What do you think is going wrong for Keir Starmer?
Well, it's interesting. I was with a bunch of new Labour people last night at an event, the types of people who were around when Tony Blair came into power in 1997, and we were discussing that very point. They had a plan, they had clear authority, they had great discipline. The one thing that has changed, Julia, in fairness, is social media, the internet was not a big thing back in 1997. It was much, much easier to control your party, to have a grip. Also, don't forget, Keir Starmer only had 9 million voters at the general election. Jeremy Corbyn, who was blown out of the water at a previous election, had 12 million voters. So it tells you something. He is a loveless landslide that Keir has. So it's not surprised that it's a waver thin majority.
His support can go down. Just finally, what do you make of the various former Prime Ministers wading in on the assisted dying bill? We had Boris Johnson, Theresa May, Liz Truss, and also actually Gordon Brown as well, former Prime Ministers, saying that they would actually vote against the assisted dying bill if they had a chance to vote. Of course, I mean, most of them won't actually have a chance, obviously not MPs. But David Cameron, who of course is in the House of Lords, he has weighed in, and he of course lost his son to a very debilitating disease, and he said that actually he's changed his mind. He's now come out in favour as a way of sort of reducing people's suffering. The only former Prime Minister we've not heard from who's still living, of course, is Tony Blair, and I'm sure he'd only support it if there was a way of introducing ID cards in relation to assisted dying, because that's what he's most obsessed with in life, we think. But do you think that's a game changer for anyone in terms of how MPs might vote tomorrow in that very key vote?
Well, the numbers are already looking positive for the assisted dying bill to go through. It's a marginal vote, but it's certainly looking like people will vote in favour of that by a majority in the House tomorrow. So that will help that mood. David Cameron's view. David Cameron's a very pragmatic kind of a person. As you say, he's been touched by personal tragedy, although that isn't driving his argument here. And I think that it will help. Maybe there's about 100 MPs who've yet to decide, and I think that will help some of them over the line on that matter. And I think it will go through.
Yeah, it is a very interesting debate, that one, isn't it? Always so good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. George Pascoe-Watson, former political editor of The Sun, still very much with his finger in various pies in the political world. Philip Ingram, just on assisted dying, that vote, I mean, I would like the law to go much further, but I kind of want more safeguards as well. On balance, if I was an MP, I would be voting for this law. But I think it's very strange it has to come through in a private member's bill.
I think it's right and proper comes through in a private member's bill.
Really?
Therefore, it's not something that is going to be party political and therefore potentially whipped. Even though
Keir Starmer voted for assisted dying in 2015. He's not spoken, and I think that's right for him not to speak in this case. But Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, has said he's opposed to this. The Justice Secretary, Bana Mahmood, has said she's opposed to it. That does impact MPs.
It does, and this is where they're using the status in government to influence the policy. But I think it's right and proper that this particular emotive issue is not a governmental related issue.
As an abortion wasn't other key moral issues. Well, we shall see how that vote comes about tomorrow. Of course, that's just the start of the process, isn't it? Loads more to talk about. Up next, we're going to talk about another very, I think, disturbing exchange in the Prime Minister's questions yesterday, when a backbench MP, Labour MP, stood up to basically ask for a blasphemy law in this country. We got rid of those some years ago, but Keir Starmer didn't appear to actually reject the idea. We're going to talk to the former chair of the Conservative Muslim Forum about that. Up next, this is Talk.
past year since it decided to start a war on the side of Hamas. Hezbollah lost much of its senior leadership, including top warlord Hassan Nasrallah and his successors, many of its senior fighters, its jihad council, and right on Israel's border. We're talking a few football fields away from the villages in northern Israel. You go over a couple of hills, you're inside Lebanon, you're in the villages. Hezbollah in these villages had a massive military infrastructure, rockets, tunnels, positions that would enable Hezbollah to carry out a surprise invasion of Israel.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. Philip Ingram is still with me. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what our next guest has to say. A blasphemy law. Now, we did used to have blasphemy laws the blasphemy laws, say it correctly, in this country, and then we got rid of them. Well, why? Because, well, actually, freedom of speech means that you should be able to criticise religion. And we do criticise religion in this country all the time, don't we? Although criticising and laughing about and mocking Christianity, absolutely fine and acceptable. Even, it would appear, according to the Metropolitan Police, blatant anti-Semitism appears to be acceptable these days, outrageously. But when it comes to one particular religion, that appears to be a problem. And we've seen this, have we not, with the Batley Grammar School teacher who just simply was discussing the issue of the Mohammed cartoons when he was basically forced into hiding by a mob threatening his death. We've also seen it with a film about Mohammed's wives, which led to mobs of people outside cinemas. We've seen it in many, many different cases. And now we've seen a Labour MP standing up in the House of Commons and asking Keir Starmer to bring in a blasphemy law to stop the desecration of religious texts and abuse of the prophets of Christianity, Islam and Judaism. Let's talk about this with Mohammed Amin. He's former chairman of the Conservative Muslim Forum and joins us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I have to say, I was really shocked when I saw this. It's Tahir Ali. He's a Labour MP for Birmingham, Hall Green and Moseley. And he urged action, cautioning about the acts of mindless desecration that risk fueling division and hatred within our society. Should we or should we not have a blasphemy law? Because I have to say, Keir Starmer's answer was pretty, I don't know, should we say vague on whether or not he agreed or disagreed with the blasphemy law?
Well, first of all, Julia, I agree with you. Keir Starmer was vague, and I think he was trying to avoid upsetting anybody, which
that's the trouble, isn't it?
Sometimes it's sensible, sometimes it's not sensible. I think he should have given a clear lead, and my view categorically is we should not have any blasphemy law.
Yeah, it's really very simple, isn't it? It's like sort of, you know, the American flag, and people get upset about people burning the American flag. I don't think it's a good thing to do, to burn a nation's flag, whether it's yours or anyone else's, but I don't think it should be illegal. I mean, certainly, I wouldn't dream of damaging or burning any book at all. I would be horrified by that, let alone a religious text that was meaningful to other people. That would be simply because of matter of public decency and politeness, I would have thought. But I would defend the right of anyone to do so if they felt necessary to do so. And what is fascinating is we've actually had some people who, in other countries, I mean, Sweden has been battling this, Denmark, other countries, where we're actually talking about people who have left, in particular, the religion of Islam, and they have, you know, burnt, desecrated the Quran, and they have faced death threats. We've had threats of fatwas from Muslim-dominated, Muslim-majority countries as well. But this only seems to happen with one religion. Mocking the Bible, mocking, you know, the Old Testament, you know, the texts for Judaism. No, apparently that's absolutely fine. It's only one particular religious book and only one particular prophet that this is an issue for.
Well, first of all, I agree with you. Burning, desecrating other people's religious texts is silly, it's downright rude, but there's no way it should be illegal. If you want to burn a book, provided you own the copy and you're not creating a fire hazard or a smoke hazard, that's up to you. It's just silly behaviour. And the question of who gets upset most, I mean, at the moment, most of the famous incidents that we're aware of have involved Muslims, but I'm sure you could find people of other religions who would also get extremely upset if you desecrated their religious texts in front of them.
I think also, I mean, like the extreme sort of right, the Christian right in America, I think we have some instances about their view on the Bible. But in this country, the only instances I'm aware of are in relation to the Quran and to Prophet, the Muslim Prophet Muhammad, and that's where it becomes an issue, because this MP says, look, this is causing division and hatred, but we are effectively living with a blasphemy law de facto already, are we not? Because people who would defend the right to do that simply don't do it because they see what happens to the Batley Grammar School teacher. We've got a case in France right now, Samir Paty, who was hunted down and beheaded because of what he did in his lessons in France. No insult intended, but he was beheaded. We saw what happened to those, Charlie Hebdo, for putting a cartoon of Mohammed on. We know what the outcome is. That's a de facto blasphemy law anyway, isn't it?
Timothy Garton Ash calls it, I think, the assassin's veto. Such behaviour is entirely wrong. I think it needs to be punished, but also Muslim religious leaders need to give a clearer, categorical statement themselves that this is entirely wrong. There are plenty of Muslims who have written saying absolutely there is no need for any kind of blasphemy rules anywhere in the world. There's a very famous article book called God Needs No Defense. Yeah. The leader of Indonesia's largest Muslim organisation, the largest Muslim organisation in the world, came out categorically against blasphemy about 20 years.
But again, those voices perhaps don't get heard in some of the debate here. Mohammed Amin, thank you for joining us, former chair of the Conservative Muslim Forum. I've left very little time for it, so I'm going to ask you about this after the top of the hour, because it's too important a subject, I think, to actually just do in just a couple of seconds. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because we have a de facto blasphemy law, but only for one religion in this country. 0344 499 1000. Love to hear your thoughts on that. Plenty more to talk about coming up at the show. Also looking forward to more of your calls coming in about Kemi Badenoch's speech yesterday. First major policy speech by her, saying Britain is not a hotel, it's our home. She said we need to be less squeamish about people talking about the impact of migration, and she pledged to bring in an annual cap on visas. Hasn't said what it would be yet or what she'd do, but this comes, that came yesterday, ahead of today's announcement at 9:30 this morning by official figures that the net migration to the UK has fallen by 20% in the last year. Yippity-doo-dah, down from over 900,000. It's now at 728,000. These numbers are absolutely astronomical. That's the net migration. That's the people who are coming to this country more than the people who have left. It's actually over 1 million in terms of new arrivals. How sustainable is that? I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Do give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text the word TALK to 87222. Message us on X at Talk TV. Back in just a few moments after an update on the news. This is Talk, Home of Common Sense.
UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Listening on DAB Plus radio on your smart speaker, or whether you are watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is great to have your company, and indeed the company of Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer. Lots to talk about in this hour. Of course, more on the net migration stats, which have fallen by 20%. Yay! Only 728,000 more people came to live in this country last year than left. I mean, only. Well done, everybody. It's not quite the tens of thousands we were promised by David Cameron in 2010. Do you think we'll ever get back to that number? Love to hear your thoughts on that. Do you think Kemi Badenoch is the answer to that? The Conservative Party leader made her first major policy speech yesterday, saying it's time to stop being squeamish about the negative impacts of mass immigration, culturally and indeed economically, and that Britain is not a hotel, it's our home. And she pledged to bring in an annual cap on visas and said even leaving the European Convention on Human Rights wasn't perhaps necessarily the most radical thing that could be done. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Also going to talk more about Keir Starmer's deal to hand over the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. It could be about to collapse after allies of Donald Trump, the incoming US president, and the new Mauritian Prime Minister who's just taken office, publicly rejected the deal. Plus, several of Donald Trump's cabinet nominees have been targeted with bomb and death threats in the space of just 24 hours, with one receiving a pro-Palestinian message. We'll talk about all of that and plenty more on the show. Do keep your calls coming in, particularly on the immigration issue. I'd love to know your thoughts on the new net migration figures and what Kemi Badenoch had to say about an annual cap on visas and saying Britain is not a hotel, it's our home. What's your reaction to that? 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK and your message to 87222. And you can also get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at a national rate. Text costs one standard network rate message. Just before we get onto migration, though, we were just talking with a guest about the possibility of new blasphemy laws in this country. Didn't quite have time to talk to Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer, about that issue. We do, to all intents and purposes, already have a blasphemy law unofficially in this country. We got rid of them, what was it, 1950s, 1960s, I think. And we had, I still remember the big fuss over Life of Brian, mocking Jesus, mocking Christianity, outrageous, Mary Whitehouse, people like that, all up in arms. Now that's 10 a penny.
That's hilarious.
Anton Deck have got in trouble with Ofcom. They've had a load of complaints about them making jokes about Reverend Richard Coles. And, again, I'm quite surprised by that, because most people just go, oh, yeah, of course we mock Christianity. It's what we do. We are officially, constitutionally, a Christian country. But a Muslim MP for Birmingham, a Labour MP, stood up yesterday at PMQs and said, look, should we not bring in, a law banning the desecration of religious texts, whether it's Christian, Judeo or Islam, but also, effectively mocking of the prophets. That's a blasphemy law.
It
Do we want that?
No, we don't. We want freedom of speech. Now, if someone is attacking, abusing an individual by you ripping up something that's precious to them in front of them, deliberately threatening way to cause them harm, there's laws now that can be used to deal with people. Now, you don't need a blasphemy law. But the trouble is with Keir Starmer not coming out very clearly against a blasphemy law, what he's done is he's created an air of indecision. And that indecision is then exploited by different radical elements that are there, whether they be nation-state elements, whether they be extreme religious elements, who misinterpret different religions in a way to suit their causes. Yeah. And that exploitation of the indecision creates more issues than it solves. Yeah. So we need a Prime Minister who's very clear and comes out,
it's really, really simple. And here's
line.
the thing, genuinely, everyone's going to be voting on the sister dying bill tomorrow in the House of Parliament. Yeah. It's consuming the mainstream media, their discussions this week. It's been brought by MP for Batley, Kim Leadbeater, and she is the MP for the Batley Grammar School teacher. Who has been in hiding for, 4 years now?
Yes.
After being threatened with death simply for having a religious studies class where he showed an image that was on the Charlie Hebdo, the cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad, to have a discussion about, blasphemy and religion. A perfectly reasonable thing to do in a free, liberal country in the Western world. And he faced death threats. He and his 4 children and his wife have had to go into hiding 4 years on. Kim Leadbeater has never once made a statement about that, never condemned it, doesn't address it, wants nothing to do with it. I mean, you know what? Maybe you should be worrying about people like him, who've got hopefully many years to live, but faces a death squad if he comes out of hiding, than the assistant. I mean, look, I'm in favour of the assistant bill, but can we prioritise what's really important? It does seem to me, you know, we have brought blasphemy laws back in by the back door, but only for one religion. And that is terrible. And again, when as the MP began with his conversation saying, we are, you know, as you will know, you know, we are in Islamophobia Awareness Month. Now, you know, Islamophobia is not the same as anti-Muslim hatred.
Exactly.
If you are abusing somebody, an individual, because of their religion, you know, you are a horrible human being. You are breaking the law. You are a criminal, and quite rightly should be brought in front of the courts for that. But criticising, mocking, laughing, being hostile towards a religious view, a religious organisation, religious teachings, prophets, the religious text. No, that's allowed in this country and, frankly, should be welcomed in this country.
And the life of Brian was absolutely hilarious, and most people find it such. And there was no offence in there. And this is where, you know, those that threatened the Batley school teacher should be identified, prosecuted, and if appropriate, deported immediately. And if more come in and threaten, that should happen. It's ridiculous that, you know, we have this indecision that comes out of different politicians and the Prime Minister, because it is exploited. And they need to be clear one way or the other and make it very, very clear that this sort of behaviour is unacceptable in our society.
Absolutely.
But we don't need a blasphemy law.
Indeed. Well, no, what we need is to actually make it very, very clear. I mean, again, why have there never been any arrests for the people who are outside the cinema when we had, what was it, I can't remember the name of the film, but the Prophet's Wives film. You know, why have no charges have been brought? The threats against the boy who, for a bet, brought in a copy of the Quran to school, and then people making death threats, and the local police chief just brought the mother, you know, in her shroud. Obviously, she had to wear her head covering to sort of basically beg for her family's life at a local meeting with the supposedly, you know, Muslim community leaders. You know, why did they not arrest people who were making death threats against that child and his family?
Too many of our
not
politicians,
a single person.
Yeah, too many of our politicians are looking over their shoulder going, oh, I don't want to upset all these other people, so I'm not going to say anything, not realising that actually what they're causing is more harm, more difficulty, and they need to be clear.
Absolutely. Look, just before we get onto the immigration issue, just some... and again, that's part of the immigration issue. If you import large numbers of people to a country who and again, that's an extremist element of that, but actually polling has shown moderate, you know, people, average law-abiding, moderate Muslims, a majority do believe that it should be an imprisonable offence to insult Prophet Muhammad. Now, I'm sorry, that is simply not in agreement with our liberal values in this country. And again, my view is always, of anybody of any religion, any background, anyone who comes to the country, if you don't like the laws here, maybe this isn't the country for you.
Well, exactly.
It's as simple as that. In the same way that I don't like the laws in Saudi Arabia, so it's not the country for me.
But we're seeing more countries across Europe turning around and saying, I'm sorry, you have to comply with our cultural laws. You're Denmark, Sweden, you're Germany, France, Germany.
Waking up to it.
You're Germany. You fly a Palestinian flag and you're arrested. And,
we are going to be the last, and we are going to be paying the penalty for that. Let's give some breaking news involving Daniel Khalif. He's the former British soldier who escaped from Wandsworth prison. He has been found guilty of spying for Iran. 23-year-old was described by the police as the ultimate Walter Mitty character, but they said his actions had posed a real threat to national security. He has been found guilty of spying for Iran. He was a lance corporal in the Royal Signals. He used a sling made from trousers worn by inmates working in the kitchen at the prison to cling to the underside of a food delivery lorry. This is back in September last year. The Category B prison in Wandsworth where he was being held. He's accused of handing secret information, including a list of soldiers, some of whom were serving in the SAS, to Iranian spies. I mean, absolutely putting people's lives at risk. You, as a senior military intelligence officer, your career, former military man, I mean, this is an outrageous act of treason.
Oh, it is, very much so. And I've overseen counterintelligence operations who've been investigating things like this that's going on. He is an individual who was exploitable, and he was exploited by a hostile intelligence services. Why was he exploitable? Because if you look at a lot of his behaviour, if you look at what is going on, he was a loner. He was exceptionally intelligent in a lot of things that he did.
Yep.
He believed that he could game the different agencies, and the agencies look for that, and they will play people in a way to suck them in.
That's what they know what they're doing, don't
That's what they've done with him.
Well, I mean, your thoughts on that, always welcome, but asking you to give your thoughts, 0344 499 1000. You can text 87222, get in touch on X at Talk TV about these migration figures, and also Kemi Badenoch's speech. Calls are charged at the national rate, text cost 1, standard network rate message. We talked about this earlier, Philip, but let's go on to this. I mean, in the year to June 2023, so the last year we had the figures, 906,000 more people came to live in this country than left. So well over a million. It was 1.2 million more. She came to the country, but other people left the country. The latest figures out this morning at 9:30 show that 728,000 came to this country in the year to June 2024. That's a fall of 20%. Now, we think that's largely down to the fact that since January, most students have not been allowed to bring dependents with them. We had absurd situation, largely Nigeria, where people were just coming in, just bringing their entire extended family. We've also got the skilled worker visa requirement, the salary requirement, the minimum salary. That, although it hasn't come into force yet, but again, was set to come into force, but it was announced in April, 26,000 up to over 38,000. So closer to people actually becoming a net contributor. 26,000, you're earning well below average salary. So the idea that you'd be a net contributor is quite laughable, frankly. Is there anything to cheer about in these figures?
Well, the thing to cheer about is the numbers are coming down, so clearly the policies that were criticised by the last government, but there's still a hell of a long way to go.
But by the way, they only announced those changes after people went, "Are you bleeding kidding me?" when they saw the last set of figures. They were quite happy to hand it. I mean, the number of visas you've given out to people and the number of dependents they bring in shouldn't have been a surprise to anyone working in the Home Office. Because they handed those visas out.
But it seems that everything's a surprise, and actually I'm not surprised that the Home Office doesn't actually know what numbers are in there. Because
you're right.
The processes are so inefficient.
They were working from home that day.
Well, they're working from home that month or that year, and that's part of the trouble. And there's no leadership, there's no proper oversight, there's no penalties if targets. But
also, I think they absolutely don't think it's an issue. But this is the thing, and we were discussing earlier. The thing about people coming to this country, I've got no issue with people who want to come and make a better life for themselves. I've got no issue with someone who wants to come here and work hard. The trouble is, are you going to be a net contributor to our society? You may be able to better your life and your family's life, but are you going to better the lives of the people already here, including, by the way, the lives of people who are also recent migrants or the children of migrants who've come here for a better life, who also have needs here. But at the end of the day, when you bring in 906,000 more people, whether you bring in 728,000 people, it's neither here nor there. If you're not building any of the extra housing, and we're not, any of the extra roads, and we're not, providing any of the extra public transport, and we're not, any of the extra school places, we're not, any of the extra doctor's appointments in NHS, we're not providing those, any of the extra GPs for people to get appointments. None of this is actually happening. There is no extra infrastructure. There are no more people providing those services to people working and living in this country than there were before all these people arrived. So here you are with over 1.6 million more people in the last 2 years net in this country. Not a single extra school, not a single extra hospital, not a single extra train station built. And we're somehow supposed to absorb those people, even though we are already one of the most crowded nations on earth. These people have to live somewhere. Their kids have to go to school somewhere. They need to go to the doctor sometime. They need to be able to travel on our roads. We can see why our roads are jammed. We can see why our housing costs are so high. We can see why kids can't get into decent schools, or why we have waiting lists that are sky high and frankly off the scale compared to any other nation on earth. We cannot keep absorbing, best part of 1 million more people every year when we are not building infrastructure. And even if we were building that infrastructure, do we want those extra 728,000 or 906,000 people? And I'm not sure we do. I think the abject failure, and Kemi Badenoch, the new Tory leader, touched on this in a major policy speech yesterday, made it very clear. We are not seeing integration. We are not seeing assimilation. And you can't on that scale. We have numerous different communities living side by side, living parallel lives in neighbourhoods where they see no one who has a different religion, different language, or different lifestyle from them. People who come from overseas, who live as if they were still living in the country of origin. Well, that's not the point of coming to this country. If you come to this country, you need to sign up to the values of this country, to the language of this country, to the values, the norms of this country. And if you don't want to sign up to them, then I'm afraid I don't think you should be welcome here. I don't think this is the country for you. And as Kemi Badenoch says, we need to stop being squeamish about talking about these things. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. There is a lot of squeamishness, though, isn't there, Philip?
There is too much squeamishness, and I've refined my assessment for people coming in as you're talking. I think there should be a net contributor assessment, and people get a provisional visa when it comes through, and they have to then prove that they are a net contributor financially, and that includes all of the dependents that come in.
Yep.
So and prove that they're a net contributor culturally. And if you can go tick, then brilliant. You're adding to society.
You need to speak English. Well, whenever I have the misfortune of going to my GP surgery in person, I'm nearly always standing waiting to talk to a receptionist to sign in behind somebody who doesn't speak English. And this incredibly long conversation goes on where the receptionist is trying to make herself heard and understood, and the person in the queue. I'm sorry, on what planet? You bring someone who speaks English with you if you don't speak English yourself. But why are you here using an NHS GP services if you don't speak English?
Well,
what are you doing here? What is contribution you're making if you don't speak English? What job are you doing realistically, where you are a net contributor, if you don't even speak the language?
Exactly. And I lived in Germany for 13 years. And if you want to do anything in Germany in through any of the Stadt institutions, the town institutions where you're having to apply for anything, all the forms were in German. There was no translation. There was no translation help. If you needed to do anything through the courts, there was no translation help that was provided. If you needed to do anything with the police, there was no translation help that was provided. It was all done in German. And if you couldn't deal with it in German, then they just ignored what it was that you were saying and doing, and you put you into the useless category.
Yeah, I mean, do you think they do translations for you, in many of the countries people come from? No,
they don't.
I know, I just find it absolutely extraordinary. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I've not been squeamish about talking about this since about 24 years ago, and I was writing about this stuff for the Sunday Express, and I got just as castigated then as I am now, but people are now waking up that this is just, we can all pretend, we can all be squeamish, we can all put our heads in the sand. This is a massive issue. We know it's a massive issue because we had an MP stand up at P&Q's yesterday talking about a blasphemy law being brought in. I mean, I'm sorry, that's where we are. That's where we are heading. We've already got a de facto one. That's where we are heading. This is why we do need to talk about this stuff, and everyone needs to stop, politicians particularly, stop being squeamish about it, because everyone knows on the street when they're trying to get their kid into a school, when they're trying to compete for housing, competing for jobs, they know what the reality is. And we know that the middle class is their Islington dinner parties. They are completely and utterly secluded from this. They have bought into the postcodes where they can buy their houses and their kids into the local state school where they don't have to deal with this issue. And they can pretend it's not happening, but the rest of the country knows it is.
But I've no problems with the MP because I know the constituency that it represents standing up and making that particular comment, because that will be representing his constituents.
Because you live in Birmingham,
I live
he was
in
a Birmingham
and
MP.
doing that. What I've got a problem with is the Prime Minister then not turning around and going, no, stop, and just slicing him off at the knees and turning around and saying, that is not the way we do things in this country. Please go back to your constituents and be very clear that is never going to happen.
For me, as long as the Batley Grammar School teacher is not able to live freely and be publicly identified without any risk of death, we have a de facto blasphemy law in this country, and that means that we need action taken on that. End of. There's no doubt at all they could identify the people who've made those threats if they really wanted to, but they're too busy on Alison Pearson's doorstep worrying about a tweet she wrote a year ago. 11:21 is the time. Love to hear your thoughts on all of this. Do get in touch. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
someone like that really is, a little bit of a kick in the teeth for women. There are so many talented women playing football. They should have stayed away from this.
And you have to assume as well that the people who, particularly athletes who get themselves involved in high-level elite athletics, whether it's boxing or running or playing football, they're doing it for the money, aren't they? They're doing it for a reason which is other than just, the joy of the sport, because they're becoming successful and they're becoming rich.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. 11:25 is the time. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, joined by Philip Ingram. We're going to keep you up to date. There's a press conference for Reform coming up in about 5 minutes' time. We're going to find out what they're going to say. I think it might relate to their membership figures. Maybe Nigel Farage will have something to say about these net migration figures. We're going to be talking to Richard Tice, Deputy of the party, coming up very soon to find out what he has to say. Or is he chairman? I lose track of what his job title is this week. Anyway, Richard Tice will be here. Always very welcome on the show. Let's go to your calls, though, on the issue of immigration and the net migration figures. Dean is in Bridgend and wants to have his say. Good morning to you, Dean.
Hello, Julia. Hello, Philip.
Come on, say hello back.
Hello.
Philip, be polite.
Hello, Dean. I never know whether she's cut me off or not.
I'm not in charge of the mic, so I've got no say over this stuff. Dean, what do you want to say, my darling?
Yeah, I want to say Kimmy Badenoch is lying.
Oh. Why?
Right? Basically, she had a voice when she was in Richie Sunak's party. She had a voice when Boris Johnson was there. She said nothing, right? All right, and if you remember, not long ago, the Tories put out a vote for giving Transport for London free bus passes to the migrants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Tories voted for it. The Labour voted for it. The Tories abstained, and Reform said no.
Yeah.
So if they really wanted a voice, they would have voted no as well. But they haven't got the voice. It's the same old people moved around in a different part of the job, still with the same ideology.
So you don't believe a word of it, basically. Now, I think her argument, she has been making some statements on this, but I think her defence would be, given that she's not here to defend herself, would be that it's cabinet responsibility, and basically that's the cabinet policy. She wasn't Home Secretary, and therefore. You have to go along. But then we've had the likes. David Cameron has spoken. That speech yesterday could have been made by David Cameron. That speech I think he pretty much did make quite some years ago. But again, nothing came of it. Boris Johnson has touched on that. Rishi Sunak has touched on a lot of it. But they never do anything about it.
Yeah, that's true. And I've got another question as well. I served in the British military for 20 years. I served in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I fought terrorism over there. And the problem is now, with this net migration coming in and no one getting checked, all these splinter cells are coming over here now, ready to do damage to an infrastructure on a flick of a phone call.
Yeah. No, I think there is a genuine concern there. But basically, you do not trust the Tories to do anything about this issue?
No. The only party that is actually for the people and is going to do right for the people is the Reform Party.
We do hear this a lot on the show. We really do. Just final question to you, Dean. Why do you think that the Tories don't want to tackle this issue? This is undoubtedly the main reason why they lost the general election, why people went to Reform or stayed at home, like the economy and other issues as well. But immigration has been absolutely, in terms of key broken promises, that's where they've really made a lot of enemies. Why do you think they don't want to do anything about it? Because if you want to do something about it, you can in government.
Because they're woke, right? They should have left ECHR when we left the European Union. When we had the Brexit, they should have left ECHR then, right? And the problem is we got all these woke lefty lawyers that's fighting for these causes, and not seeing the devastation it's having on the streets of the UK, where these posh lawyers and all these people do not live.
As I was just saying, they simply aren't impacted by it. That they really don't. They really just think everyone's just a horrible, nasty bigot for saying stuff which is the blatant truth. And again, there's nothing bigoted about it. People are talking about facts. Dean, thank you very much indeed for your call. Neil is in West Yorkshire. Hello, Neil.
Hello, Julia.
Hello. What do you want to say? By the way, no hello for you, Philip. Just so you.
That's because I didn't respond last time.
Know
exactly.
your place. Know your place.
Hello, Philip too. I like Philip.
No, don't encourage him.
He's got a very friendly smile. I like his
He's
face.
very friendly, isn't he? I tell you who really like him. The makeup ladies.
Oh, do they?
Just saying. A little bit of a twinkle. Anyway, Neil, let's talk about what you want to talk about.
Well, I'm walking the dog. I normally have to sit down and compose myself before I speak to you, but I'm walking the dog at the moment. When I heard that, it was disconcerting to hear that politicians stand up in the House of Commons, the home of our democracy, and ask or insist that we introduce blasphemy laws.
Yeah.
I mean...
Wasn't it even worse that Keir Starmer basically agreed with him?
I know. He should have put him on the back foot there and then and made it quite clear.
Yeah.
Because we know that a blasphemy law, if introduced, which I pray to God it won't be, will only protect Islam.
Yep.
It'll be a one-way street.
Yep.
Won't it?
And no religion should be protected from criticism.
No, I mean, I, like most of these sort of Anglo-Saxon people of this country going back centuries, I'm a Christian, whether it's Church of England or Catholic. You know, we put up with jokes, we put up with slurs, we don't lose our heads.
Don't threaten to behead other people.
Exactly. And we don't demand retribution like certain aspects of the Islamist community.
Well, again, it is only, I mean, again, in terms of that is only a small minority of extremists, isn't it? It's not mainstream average Muslim person living peacefully in this country.
Oh, of course it is. I'm not suggesting that Muslims are, those isolated, but numerous Islamist attacks represent the Muslim community. But we just know that a blasphemy law would be brought in to protect them and protect them solely.
Yeah, and that would be the case, exactly. But again, I don't believe that Keir Starmer believes in free speech.
No, well, look what happened to the people who joined in with the riots,
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really big concern. It really is. Neil, thank you very much indeed for your message. Let me get some of the texts and tweets as well coming in. Ruth talks about Kemi Badenoch, says she talks of leaving the ECHR. Blair installed the ECHR legislation into the Human Rights Act statute book 1998. So until that is removed from the Human Rights Act, the UK will not rid itself of the EU. Alan says, my reaction is I will continue to vote for Reform UK. Derek says the Tories left the floodgates open for 14 years too long. They're all as bad as each other. And John says, funny, because the Tories opened that hotel to the entire world and kept it open. She can do one if she thinks we believe they will do anything about it, just as bad as Labour. And Jude says the problem with democracy is that the political parties will go to any lengths for votes. And this is the thing, it's a very reasonable bit of cynicism by voters, isn't it, Philip Ingram, that we only saw that fall in net migration to this country after it was exposed that it was over 900,000, and everyone went, are you kidding me? In the year before, 750,000. And basically, and I think actually it was James Cleverly who came in who cut the number of visas. But these visas are being handed out willy-nilly. At the same time, of course, we had illegal migration as well. These are two completely separate things, obviously. But basically, total lack of control of our borders, both for illegal and legal migration. But why do you think that the politicians of pretty much every political hue don't really seem to think this is a bad thing? Is it about the economy? Is it about bringing in cheap labour? Is it because they do believe that, that the world's a better place if we're diverse and a melting pot and all of that stuff, that language gets talked? Well, why do they not listen to voters who have said again and again and again and again at every election and at the referendum in 2016, we would like lower levels of immigration, please?
It's difficult to get an exact reason reason. I think there's two reasons to it. One, people become fixated in trying to look after every minority within their constituency, and that's why you get the MPs and your Prime Minister and the indecision you get in there. The second thing is a lot of those that are opposing it, we heard this in Tory policy the whole way through, was we have to come out of the ECHR to deal with this. No, we don't.
This is the convention.
This is the European Human Rights Convention. No, we don't, because if you look at how France and Germany, they're part of it, and they just ignore it. And
but I don't want us to ignore something we signed up to. I think we should just, if we're going to ignore it, let's not sign up to it. We don't need a European convention to ensure human rights in our country.
This is where we misinterpret it. We take it as gospel and apply it religiously. What we should be doing is taking it as advisory and applying our own laws on top of it. And therefore, if our own laws are meaning that we're having to apply something that is should be taken advisory, then we change our laws.
We're
That's
an
what
independent nation state.
Correct.
No court, no convention.
We don't have to withdraw from it, because we can say we will stick to the principles of it, and we'll look at whether it.
And by the way, who gave the European Convention the principles on human rights? Yes,
we did.
You're welcome, the world. Well, Europe in this case, anyway. 11:34 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking actually to the Centre for Migration Control about those latest stats. We're also going to go stateside and talk about, Donald Trump and Chagos Islands, and indeed those bomb and death threats against some Trump cabinet nominees. That's up next. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Philip Ingram is still with me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and we're joined right now by the Centre for Migration Control's Research Director, that's Robert Bates, to talk about the latest migration figures and indeed what Kemi Badenoch had to say in her speech yesterday. Of course, we're talking a lot about that with you as well. Do keep those calls coming. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Robert, thank you so much for joining us.
Morning, Julia. Morning,
what did you make of these figures? Because big fall in net migration, down from a whopping 906,000 in the year to June 2023, down to 728,000 by 20% last year. That's just the net figure, not the overall figure, the number of people who've come to this country from abroad to make their lives here. What do you make of that fall, and what is it down to?
Well, the numbers for 2023 and for 2024 are a lot worse than I expected them to be. I think the general assumption would be that the year ending September 2024, it would be about 500,000, because obviously the Conservative Party had introduced those measures that they claimed would be incredibly successful at the end of their administration. They claimed that they would be massively slashing the numbers that came in. I think the fact that...
part of that, wasn't it, the not allowing most students, unless you do a PhD, to bring your dependents with you, because we know Nigerian students were... That was the particular stat that was shocking at the time, were just bringing 4 or 5 dependents. But they did have a minimum salary requirement for the skilled worker visa, and they raised that from about 26k to over 38k. But that hasn't actually come into force yet. So I don't know why people would have thought that would have impacted visas to this point.
So it was the dependent issue that was what the Conservatives were claiming was the key success that they'd implemented. I mean, you raise a really important point about the salary threshold of 38,700, probably still not high enough to actually make sure that we end up with an incredibly highly skilled immigration system. But the reason why that is important is because the Labour Party are currently undergoing a review of that uplift anyway, and there's every likelihood that in the coming months we will see that they scrap that. So if we think that we've hit the absolute rock bottom with these numbers and that things are going to keep falling, I'm afraid that we're in for a bit of a rude awakening in the coming months, because as we know, the Labour Party don't have a single plan to bring down legal migration, let alone illegal, which is its own problem. But on the legal migration issue, they have done absolutely nothing. They've set up no policy proposal that one could objectively look at and think, yes, this is a plan that would actually take us back down to levels, not even levels that the British public have voted for and the British public want, which is, tens of thousands at the very maximum, but the levels that we were seeing in 2013, 2014, which now seem a very long time ago. And we remember the furore that we saw with politics at that point. That was the most salient issue.
And that was when it was about 200,000 and people were outraged. I mean, it was the massive issue. It was a huge driving force for UKIP, huge driving force for that pledge for the referendum on leaving the EU, because at the time we were told, well, we can't do anything about it because we're in the EU, free movement, what can we do? And part of the drive for that Brexit referendum was, well, we'll be in charge of our own borders. And yet since then, other than with, 2020, we have seen under, Boris Johnson, the man who delivered Brexit, rocketing legal migration, the Home Office handing out visas willy-nilly to the rest of the world. I mean, why do you think this has happened, under the Tory watch in particular? Because they were elected each time on a promise to reduce migration. Even, the tens of thousands pledged from David Cameron in 2010, that was still in force for best part of a decade, wasn't it? So why did they keep allowing net migration to go up, even when they did have full control of our borders after we left the EU?
Well, they got too clever by half, because obviously the pitch during the referendum was to take back control. And if you look at Conservative briefings that were being sent around at the time, trying to justify the sky-high numbers that we started to see, the emphasis they were placing was, well, we do have control, and we've decided to go down this approach. We've decided to dramatically implement a really low salary threshold. We've decided to introduce things like the health and social care visa, which effectively has been a backdoor for incredibly low-skilled immigration that a lot of the time they were bringing with them 2 or 3 dependents per visa. So what the Conservative Party did was they allowed themselves to get captured by kind of lobby groups in the health and social care sector, and to kind of be presented with worst case scenarios that they fell for hook, line and sinker. And rather than actually listen to the very clear command that they were given by the British public to bring down migration, they decided to tell us that all we wanted was control. We wanted this abstract notion of control, that it didn't matter if we were seeing hundreds of thousands coming in, because we had control. Because
we had control, points-based system, but then the points set too high. And again, each time when the public see the figures, they go, no, that wasn't what we want. And they're not listened to until there's an election. And then, of course, we saw these changes come in. But there's a difference with Labour, isn't there? And this is my real concern, is because having interviewed many Labour front benches over the years, and Yvette Cooper, who's now the Home Secretary, I remember talking to her quite some years ago, they don't really believe in border control at all. They're kind of the view that, no one's an illegal person. They talk a good talk now, but actually, fundamentally, they believe in kind of open borders, and wouldn't Britain be a much nicer place if it was just a complete mishmash of cultures, and like they believe in multiculturalism, they believe in the diversity, and they believe in open borders. And whenever I've asked any Labour politicians, okay, give me a number. You know, okay, you say we have more people, whether they were asylum seekers or whether they are legal migrants. Give me a number. Is it, 100,000 a year, 1 million, 10 million? What's the number? They'll never give me a number. Kemi Badenoch has talked about wanting to have an annual cap on the number of people coming. Is that anything different from us saying we've taken back control and we decide how many people? How would that cap be set, and would that work?
It would be incredibly difficult to actually see how she could persuade the British public on that point, first and foremost. I think, we've been told that there would be annual caps by successive Conservative prime ministers over the years. I think from what I could understand, the proposal that they were setting out at the moment, they haven't actually put a number on it, and they've kind of left it in cahoots to business consultation, which is the very problem that we do have, because obviously businesses are incredibly incentivized to lobby for mass migration, to lobby for very loose visa restrictions. It's the diffuse argument that the British public would want to be presenting that just doesn't get heard in those kind of consultations, because by the very nature of them being consultations, they're more likely to garner those that have a vested interest. So I think a lot remains to be seen. We should also remember that the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, has repeatedly refused to actually show his support for a cap. I mean, I think this is a bit of an about turn on his behalf as well. So these two put out a proposal. I think it's up to them now to try and convince us that they actually mean it and to set out more meaningful plans as how they bring it about. But I'm not convinced.
Well, again, judging by the people getting in touch today on the phones and by text and by tweets, they're not convinced either. Now, that's, of course, all related to legal migration, which is the vast majority of people coming to this country. In terms of illegal migration, particularly channel boat migrants, we've still, by the way, everyone's still forgetting, we've still got people coming through in the backs of lorries as well. Kemi Badenoch also said yesterday in this major policy speech that, even coming out of the European Convention on Human Rights, which is something that was a pledge from her closest rival, Robert Jenrick, during that campaign for the Tory leadership, she said that may not even be like the most radical thing they could do. They could even go further than that. They should have a complete review of the whole policy. I mean, that's encouraging, I think. But do we need to come out of the European Convention on Human Rights to tackle the illegal migration problem?
We do. It's not the silver bullet, but it's definitely a key instrument that does need to take place. There is a whole host of domestic reforms that we in Britain seem to be peculiarly burdened with, unlike others in Europe that are also members of the ECHR and seem to be doing slightly better at dealing with their illegal migration crisis, although obviously we see people like Maloney still running up against the ECHR. I think leaving ECHR is an important one. We also then need to look at scrapping human rights acts, the kind of subsidies that we're giving to left-wing law firms. A lot of them are on very lucrative government contracts, and we're about to see, obviously, plans brought forward by the Justice Secretary to give them a lot more money to expedite the Labour plan for amnesty to tens of thousands of illegal migrants. So there's a whole host of other things that we need to be doing domestically as well, but I don't see how we can really introduce a proper deportation programme for those that have entered the country illegally whilst we're in the ECHR.
Very interesting to hear from you. Robert Bates, thank you very much, Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. Contradicting what you were saying, Philip, there about whether we need to leave the ECHR. I think we can all agree on, though, all three of us, it's not a silver bullet. That's like the Rwanda plan wasn't going to solve it. You've got those pull factors, you've got these push factors. And by the way, it's not climate change that's making people come to this country. I mean, give me a break. These people are so out of touch with how people really think. But at the end of the day, you've got a darn good chance of staying here, and as even a rotten, 2-star hotel in the middle of nowhere is better than the life a lot of these people have had. Well, and we're not going to change their countries overnight or at any point in the next 10 years. So we need to, stop people getting in the first place, and once they get in, say, bye-bye, you're gone. We don't care where you go, but you're not here.
Yeah. Legal migrants tend to come in and have somewhere to live. Illegal migrants come in and they don't, and they rely on the state. Yeah. And interestingly, I saw, as part of a tweet that came out of the Reform UK statement that's going on at the moment, that over that same period of time, spending on asylum went up 36%.
Yeah.
And that's the bit that's costing us huge amounts of money, and there's a little prospect of us getting any of it back. Yeah. And it seems as if these people are just going to be fast-tracked into.
They're going to stay. They're going to stay here. They're officially off the books. I think Labour think they're going to make the story go away. They really are not, because people can see it with their eyes and ears. Just to let you know, we'll say if you're watching on our YouTube page, you'll have seen that we've actually playing Nigel Farage speaking at a Reform UK press conference taking place in London. The chairman, Zia Youssef, a regular on the show, he is actually announced that Reform UK's party membership, or it's not officially a party, is now above 100,000. They are creeping up to Tory territory, and that is quite something. Nigel Farage has given his reaction to the net migration figures, and also Kimi Badenoch's pledge to deal with this issue on immigration. He said, "I have had enough of being lied to by the Tories." But he has said that things are even worse under the Labour government. I have to say, I don't know who's not going to agree with that. But there we are. 11:48 is the time. We'll keep you up to date on that. Up next, we are going to be talking about what's going on stateside and what's going on with the Chagos Islands as well. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
I don't know the international law position. I do know that we've signed ourselves up to the International Criminal Court, as, for example, did South Africa.
But so has France, and so has Germany, and so has loads of other countries.
They have, and I'm not sure what their position is. I think we need to be. We need to look at the bigger picture. So whatever Netanyahu has done. What we also need to do is ensure that the peace settlement we've just had in Lebanon, and potentially a peace settlement we might have in Gaza, is enforced. We need to balance out those two things.
The UK on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. 11:52 is the time. Philip Ingram's still with me. And let's go stateside now. Talk to Laurie Laird, US political commentator. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, I must talk about, just very quickly, first of all, about the Chagos Islands, which, I mean, again, no one was paying much attention to, but of course we have this major US base, Diego Garcia, one of the Chagos Islands in the middle of the Pacific. Chagos Islands is going to be handed over to Mauritius by the UK. We understand that Donald Trump's team not happy about this at all because of a big US-American naval base, I mean, really, really huge American naval base. What would be the reaction, do you think, of the Trump White House if that happens and that's pushed through by Keir Starmer here in the UK before Trump gets into power?
Look, I think Labour is right to be concerned, that America will be concerned about this. This area of the world is probably off Donald Trump's radar screen at the moment. But Diego Garcia, where that U.S. base is located, is a crucial base, very crucial. And many operations the U.S. has blown over the past couple of wars. Sorry, I'm not articulate this morning. Sorry, Julia. But if the theater of operations turns to the Far East, which is where many people think the next conflict will be, that base on Diego Garcia will become ever more important. Now, Marco Rubio, who's Trump's incoming Secretary of State, no reason to think he will not be confirmed, said back when this deal was done that he thought it was a very, very poor deal. I think that the UK will come under a lot of pressure to not get this through. We're seeing that Keir Starmer's sending Jonathan Powell over to try and sweet talk, some of the incoming American administration. The other thing to keep in mind, and we're talking about this in military terms, but the Chagosians here in the UK are furious about this deal because they say they were never consulted.
Yeah, no one can understand why it's all come about. It's quite bizarre.
Absolutely.
And it does seem a very silly way of really making Donald Trump very angry. I mean, we've already got David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, over here. He's insulted Donald Trump enough times, but now also saying that he would have no choice but to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, under that the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant, even though Donald Trump has made it really clear that any country that does agree to that arrest warrant will basically face repercussions from the United States. But let's talk about repercussions for Donald Trump's cabinet picks. You mentioned Marco Rubio there, but a number of his cabinet picks have faced bomb and death threats in just a space of 24 hours. Who has this been aimed at, and where do we think they're coming from?
A remarkable story, Julia, and I think even more remarkable is how little information we're getting out of this. The number of cabinet picks that has been targeted seems to be under wraps. I've seen anywhere from 8 to 12, and some of the candidates who have been targeted, these are not household names. I mean, Elise Stefanik, who is the nominee to be ambassador to the United Nations, not a household name in the U.S. Where are these coming from? No clarity whatsoever. Is this an organized thing? Is this lone wolves operating, and are some copycat threats? We know so very little about this, but it's chilling, isn't it? Absolutely chilling. And over the short term, the fact that these people are not well protected, they are only nominees.
Let's talk about the protection level that Donald Trump had as not only an ex-president, but the Republican nominee. I mean, it's just extraordinary that, I mean, the assassination attempt where he did actually, get hit by a bullet, that was able to happen. I still find it extraordinary that anyone involved in that was not instantly sacked on the spot. But this, obviously, I think, the FBI and others are perhaps going to rather more efforts to protect people now, having seen what's actually happened and the level of the threat against his team.
And in a philosophical question, Julia, why on earth would you ever get involved in politics? We've seen politicians here complain of trolling, which is completely pernicious and terrible. But in the U.S., these people are targeted by people who own guns, multiple guns. Yeah. It really does dilute the talent that may want to get involved in this business.
Absolutely. And again, we've seen on the other side, the debate, Nancy Pelosi, her husband, almost beaten to death at their Washington home before, some years ago. Let's also talk about immigration. It's a massive big issue here in the UK. We just had our net migration figures, and that's for legal migration. When we talk about illegal migration, off the scale in America, well over 10 million people believed to have crossed the border under the Biden years illegally from Mexico. And we've had these threats from Donald Trump, haven't we, of tariffs on Mexico and indeed the Canadians as well. But he has announced a major breakthrough, Donald Trump, on the border talks. He claims that the new Mexican president has vowed to stop illegal migration into the US effective immediately. What do we know about this?
Well, we know very little because Claudia Sheinbaum, the Mexican president, seems to have been in a different conversation with Donald Trump.
Oh dear!
Because after the conversation when Donald Trump tweeted, President Sheinbaum has agreed effective immediately to essentially close that border. President Sheinbaum got on X and said, "We had a conversation. Don't get me wrong, but we discussed immigration and how to do it in a humane way." And she used some lovely flowery words about immigration being, migration of peoples and countries working together. I'm not sure whether these two people were actually
in the same room. Well, we're into the same territory as Donald Trump claiming that he had a conversation with Vladimir Putin, and that was denied by the Kremlin, and we were like, who to believe? But then his own son, Don Jr., has said, there was no direct conversation. I don't know how much of this is being made up. You'd have thought for the Mexican president, it was in her interest not to have millions of people trailing through Mexico from South and Central America, and indeed often from as far away, as Vietnam and Pakistan, coming that bizarre route to get into America, to actually have them trailing through her country. You'd think it would be in her interest, and yes, it would also be humane.
Well, look, this is a real big game of chicken, and this may be Donald Trump being a bit of a genius, sort of, announcing some kind of victory before he even gets into office. Because look, if he goes ahead and imposes 25% tariffs on all goods coming in from Mexico and Canada as well, but let's look at Mexico in the first instance. Both countries are going to hurt. This is going to hurt both.
And he argues that he plays hardball and that's how he gets his deals. But we'll see if that deal does actually exist, won't we? Laura Laird, US political commentator, thank you so much for joining us. Just before we go to updating the news, breaking news from that Reform UK press conference, former Tory minister and former MP Dame Andrea Jenkins has defected to Reform UK. It's just been announced at that press conference. We'll be speaking to Deputy Leader Richard Tice about that in about 20 minutes' time. Do stay tuned. We'll get Philip Ingram's response. We're also going to be talking to the wonderful, the brilliant Tanya Gay Thompson about the assisted dying bill. This is Talk.
Smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Welcome back to the show. Thank you very much, whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, on your connected device. It is lovely to have your company. Also, great to have the company still of Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer. So much more I want to talk to you about. I mean, at least 10 stories we haven't got to today. There's so much to talk about.
Nothing going on.
Nothing going on. Lots of breaking news in the last half hour, so we'll get to some of that. But also going to be talking about assisted dying. That bill is going to be debated for 5 hours tomorrow in the House of Commons, and then there's going to be a vote. And a former Supreme Court president who ruled on some of the most high-profile assisted dying cases has declared his support for a change in the law, as indeed has David Cameron, the first former Prime Minister to speak out for that. Also, Keir Starmer's deal to hand over the Chagos Islands to Mauritius may be about to collapse after allies of Donald Trump and the new Mauritian Prime Minister publicly rejected the deal, although we understand that things behind the scenes are saying things rather differently. Plus, the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, has said he would have no choice but to seek an arrest warrant for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu if he stepped foot in the UK after the International Criminal Court issued a demand last week, because the French are saying something rather different. So what is the legal truth? Plus, Britain's roads are increasingly being targeted by professional beggar gangs who besiege drivers to demand cash, and very terrifying it is too. We're talking about all of that. This is Talk, as I say, the home of common sense. Just that breaking news, Philip Ingram, we just had about Dame Andrea Jenkins. She's a former government minister. She's a former Tory MP. She has joined Reform UK. She's going to be standing as a mayoral candidate in an upcoming in Lincolnshire race, which is in May of next year. This was announced at the same time as Nigel Farage and his party chairman, Sir Yusuf, pointing out they've now got 100,000 membership. We've also seen, a campaign manager from the Tories move over from Tory central office, move to the Tories. They're taking over a lot of local campaigners as well. There's no doubt at all, Reform UK, they haven't lost their momentum. They're on the rise. How much do you think the conversations today about net migration, promises from Kemi Badenoch, that speech last night, talking about this issue, net migration figure showing a 20% fall, but still to 728,000 people more coming into the country than leaving the country last year. We are talking about, so, this is such a big issue for so many people. Do you think that's one of the driving forces behind reform? And do you think that they are on a momentum that is going to continue going up?
Well, it seems that way at the moment, and I think it's also enhanced by the fact of the indecision that we're getting out of the Prime Minister and the current government in what's going on, because there's nothing coming out to try and appease those individuals who have joined Reform or following Reform because they're angry at everything that's gone on. Nobody seems to be dealing with and looking at what has caused that anger and how do we then try and bring those people back into mainstream politics. And therefore, I think it's almost too late now. I think Reform is going to become a mainstream political party.
They're already having an impact. PMQs in debates are saying some of the things which, a lot of people say, well, why haven't the Tories been raising this and the like? And I wonder if that impact... Well, we're going to be talking to Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of the party, coming up in about 15, 20 minutes' time. Let's also just talk about Daniel Khalif as well. He is a man, he's a very young British man. He's only 23 years old, but he has been found guilty in the last hour or so of basically being a very real threat to national security. He escaped from Wandsworth Prison, you remember, last September. He's been found guilty now of spying for Iran. He was a Lance Corporal for the Royal Signals. He used a sling made from trousers worn by inmates working in the prison kitchen to cling to the underside of a food delivery lorry back in September last year. It was an audacious escape attempt, although it then emerged when we looked at the security that actually pretty much anyone could have just walked out of that prison, a really Category B prison with very little decent security. But he was being held in the prison, having been accused of handing secret information, including a list of soldiers, some of whom serving in the SAS, to Iranian spies. I mean, this is the most outrageous act of treason. Obviously, we're awaiting sentencing. He's only just been found guilty, but this is a horrendous crime by a British citizen against his own comrades.
Yeah, very, very much so. And, junior non-commissioned officers, which he was in the Royal Signals are the communicators for the Army. They've got access to some of the most sensitive systems and the data that's held within those systems. And that's why he was such a big threat. And
but what motivates someone like this to do this? You're serving in the British military. Why would you why would you have done this?
There's a number of different reasons. I don't think his motivation has come out in detail yet because of all of the debates going on sub judice. One of the arguments that came through was he was trying to play the double agent game. He's a young lad. He's very intelligent.
The Security Service said he was a Walter Mitty character. So he's kind of living a sort of a very rather exciting life in his head.
And therefore, you tie in. He's exceptionally intelligent. He's got initiative, and hence why he escaped the way he did. He congratulated the police officer for catching him. That's not a normal thing when you do that. So he's probably on the spectrum somewhere. If we're looking at, I'm guessing here rather than knowing what's going on, but. That leaves individuals like that easy to be exploited. And he will have been spotted in some of his activities online by Iranian intelligence. And professional intelligence officers are very sophisticated. They're very good at doing this. And they know how to play people to groom them. And he'll been carefully groomed into supplying little bits to test, and the names themselves might not have compromised much, but it'll have been a test. They will have been classified, and therefore that's him breaking the official
it's just such
secrets
an
act.
awful thing to do, isn't it, for your country? Let's talk about a less serious case. Greg Wallace, you'll know him from MasterChef fame. He's going to step away from presenting MasterChef. It's been announced in the last hour, while complaints made to the BBC from various individuals about historical allegations of misconduct are investigated. This is what the show's production company, Banijay UK, has said. He's not the first, he's not the last. This does keep on happening, doesn't it? Allegations of misconduct. And we've had this, there we get Jeremy Clarkson, shouting at people on his show. We've had allegations with Jermaine Jenas about, inappropriate text to female staff. We've had rather more serious allegations about, people like, Russell Brand and others, far more serious. But we never know the full details on this, but we are often in a situation where someone is accused of something, their career is over, their name, their reputation is gone in tatters, and we often don't get to know any of the details, and people obviously have a right to privacy on that. But I have no idea. I've never met the man. I hear he's not the most charming man in the world, but I do always worry about the way that people are put on pedestals. They do very well in life. There's the big characters. They're very famous. They're very rich, and then they are torn down. And often we don't really know. And your whole career is sort of resting on someone not pointing the finger at you. I do worry we get into bad habits here. It's happened to Hollywood figures. It's happened to major Hollywood stars who've later been able to sue when actually found not to have done anything wrong at all.
Well, exactly, but we also find that there's people who are put on a pedestal and they use the fact of their fame and their position to exploit that and carry out abusive acts. And this is where, until it's fully investigated, we don't know what all the facts are, and we shouldn't judge what's happened just for the fact that he's taken the decision to step back.
Well, no, he won't have taken. People don't take. We always hear that. You're basically told you're going to have to step back or we're going to sack you. That's how it works with these things. But I always wonder in these scenarios. But I suppose in many other offices, you would be told, afraid you're going to have to step back. But the question is whether you still get paid, whether you can still pay the mortgage.
But it's.
I've got no idea.
It's any profession. If someone
I don't watch the show.
It's any profession. If someone is questioning that and they have to be suspended from their role, and we see this in the police, we see this in the military, we see this everywhere. They're suspended from their role. It's not them being guilty. It's putting them in a position where they can't influence what's going on. They're investigated, and at the end of that investigation, a decision is made. They can't intimidate people. And this is what's happening.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, anyway, we'll keep you posted on that story. That actually does tie in with a rather more serious allegation. Obviously, we've had more and more women coming forward about sexual offences alleged against the late Mohammed Al-Fayed, the then Harrods boss. I worked in the Evening Standard in my 20s, so I'm in my mid-50s now. 30 years ago, it was well known. It was well known in the newsroom. People talked about it. People say, "Oh, why didn't you do anything about it?" It was written about. There was a documentary about it. I mean, it was well known. There were court cases about this stuff. It was well known that he was sexually abusive. That young women were taken from, plucked from working on the tills at counters in the makeup room, at Harrods, and taken to his private office, and that there were these allegations of abuse. In the same way, it was well known that Jimmy Savile was abusing people. I know because I spoke to someone who generally said, the nurses would say, try and pretend to be asleep so he doesn't come round, But the authorities just seem to allow this to happen. What has emerged now is, we're looking at about, the best part of 100 women, if not more, come forward. The youngest, we're talking young teenage girls. We're talking about children being abused by him. most disgusting thing about this is that he would send women away for apparently staff, for medical inspections by a female doctor, by the way, and then be signed off as they didn't have sexually transmitted diseases. So then when he raped them, he wouldn't catch a disease. I mean, this was the most premeditated, monstrous man. But the key thing is, he was surrounded by people, very senior staff, security staff, people were paid off, people were threatened if they came forward to the police. Police investigations were sort of throttled at birth by them. We saw this even go to the Department of the Director of Public Prosecutions, to the CPS. Oh, who was in charge then? Oh, you might know him. One Keir Starmer. I believe he's gone on to do rather well since. And the decisions to prosecute didn't go forward. But now the Met Police say they're investigating at least 5 people, many of whom worked with Mohammed Al-Fayed. And basically, they are basically looking at how they basically not just covered up and prevented the arrest, but actually basically enabled him to abuse these women. Why does this keep happening, Philip?
Oh, I don't know why it keeps happening, but it's clear there was a facilitation and grooming gang that's there, and they're as guilty.
She'll do.
They're as guilty as him, and he's unfortunately passed before justice can be sought. But those that have facilitated this, those that have groomed the individuals, those that have delivered them to him, are as guilty and need to be investigated. And then the police officers and the lawyers who made the decisions not to investigate and prosecute, again, they should be investigated.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they could have stopped it if they'd actually applied the law.
This is the thing I find astonishing. We go back to the Harvey Weinstein, and again, female members of staff who would deliver these young wannabe actresses to his hotel room, at 2 a.m, knowing what was going to happen, because they'd seen the last 2 run out crying, clutching their shoes, having been raped by him. I just find it inexplicable. I find it inexplicable that good men will allow this to happen. Even more so that women would allow this to happen to other women. That's the bit I find utterly impossible to understand. The
standards you accept are the standards you ignore. That's why those that ignored what was going on are as guilty as he is.
And the doctor, who, dead now again. I mean, how outrageous. Why are you screening women without their consent for sexually transmitted diseases?
Well, exactly.
And then pass the information to him personally. Not allowed to do that on every single ground.
Yeah, and this is why the professional bodies need to get involved, and there needs to be a huge investigation. I do hope that Metropolitan Police are going to look at this properly, and it will all come out.
But again, do we trust the Met Police? Given it was the Met Police that didn't pass on many times all these allegations, and everyone says, well, who's going to believe these women? Well, they'll believe them when there's enough women. But again, why wouldn't women be believed? I know it's a different age now, more women like to be believed, but I do just find it really difficult to comprehend.
I know the legal team that's representing the women and the lead King's Counsel with him. He's good. He's not going to let this.
No, absolutely not. It is just outrageous. The story is running and running. But again, he's dead now. But a lot of the other people who facilitated this are not. Now, we were really hoping to talk to you just a few moments ago. Baroness Tanya Gray-Thompson, of course, the crossbench peer, but also 11-time Paralympian gold medalist, about the assisted dying bill. It's coming in the Commons tomorrow. Sadly, we can't get her up on the line, so we've got some technical problems there, which is a great shame, because I want to talk to obviously before we had that vote tomorrow. She has been one of the leading campaigners against the assisted dying bill. We've had a former Supreme Court Justice, a President of the Supreme Court indeed, actually weighing in the last 24 hours, saying they would support this. We've had David Cameron, the first former Prime Minister, to say actually he's changed his mind. He's voted against assisted dying before. Now he would vote in favour with all the safeguards contained in this bill, private members' bill brought by Kem Leadbeater. We're told that the vote is closed. We're not entirely sure how many MPs are going to vote, but it looks certainly a strong possibility that this vote could go through. It's the start of a process. 5 hours of debate, this vote. We then get into the committee stage. It's going to go to the Lords. There'll be lots of changes and things made. Are you largely in favour of assisted dying in the context of which it is 6 months, only if you have 2 doctors believe you've only got 6 months to live, and only for those people with a judge overseeing it? Are you, or would you like it to be expanded so people with intolerable suffering, as has happened in other countries, or people who've got long-term diseases or disabilities, that they could be open to this? Or do you feel the safeguards enough? Where do you stand on this, Philip?
Well, it's an interesting one. I can understand people's concerns about the potential for it moving away from into where the bill is at the moment, into people being almost pushed into it, which is Tammy Gray-Thompson's approach.
Especially representing disabled
exactly, because
people.
this has happened in other countries that have brought this in. However, from my personal position, I for many years was suffering from severe PTSD. I was very suicidal, and therefore wanted to end my life and tried to do it on occasions. But looking at what the proposals are at the moment, those proposals, if it had gone through, if I had then said, can I be killed by the state, I would not have passed any of those and would have still got into treatment, would have come out the other end. And largely looking at the suffering and talking to my mother whenever she was suffering towards the end and everything else, I want to decide when I go. And if I'm suffering, if I'm a burden to my family, if there's no quality of life, I want to be able to make that decision.
And that's the same for me and my family. We're all pretty much in agreement on that. But again, you want the safeguards for people who are vulnerable. This bill does seem to have a lot of safeguards. I best in the world, you say, but whether that's enough. But it is interesting how that is the big concern. But again. And certainly, again, Tammy Gray-Thompson has lived a magnificent life. She's an incredibly inspirational figure and done amazing things. But someone else may say, but that's not the life they want. Whatever it is, or one person's level of suffering or pain, the quality of life they feel they've got, whether it's a disability or a disease, someone, dementia. For me, certainly for my family, a lot of us feel, we've watched an elderly relative who's had dementia for many years and sitting in a care home. We've all agreed that's not what we want. Would we want the option before we got to that point to end our own lives?
Yeah, and again, the option's there, but only for the rich, only those that can afford to go to Dignitas.
And people do take their lives.
And people do that. And then people have half-hearted attempts to take their lives in other ways and suffer even more. And therefore, there needs to be something, and therefore I support the bill. Yeah,
I think it's not perfect for me, but I think we need to start the ball rolling on that front, certainly. But obviously that vote will happen tomorrow afternoon, early evening. 12:19 is the time. Let me also just get to we've talked so much now about the immigrant migration figures. My question out to you today is largely about that. Net migration to the UK falling by 20%. Oh, well done in the last year. It's still at 728,000, down from 906,000. More people coming to the country and living here than leaving the country. That's in the year to June of this year. I mean, these figures are absolutely staggering and certainly way over the tens of thousands that David Cameron promised in his manifesto back in 2010. We've never come even close. I think 200,000 it was quickly at then. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch has also said that Britain is not a hotel, it's our home. She's pledged to bring in an annual cap on visas. I wonder what your reaction is to that. 0344 499 1000, text 87222 to talk and get in touch on X at Talk. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost one standard network rate message. Before we go to a break, and we're going to talk to Richard Tice about all of that afterwards, let's squeeze in a couple of calls if we can. Robert is on the line. He's in North Yorkshire. Hello, Robert. Hello. What are you chuckling about?
Well, getting on the radio, to be honest.
Hey, I feel that way every day.
Right. We're talking about immigration.
Yep.
I only heard these figures about an hour or so ago, and I was absolutely gobsmacked. I could not believe it. To be honest, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still listening to you.
Oh, sorry. Carry
on.
All right, I was absolutely gobsmacked, and in fact, I'm having to stand up to talk to you because it insults me so much. 900,000 people. Okay, it's dropped to 700,000 people, but that is the population of Leeds every goddamn year.
Yeah.
It's
insane. But it's absolutely
unrealistic.
insane that we've got into this situation, and they'll all be going, "Oh, isn't it good? It's gone down 20%," and we're all looking at them and going, "Are you crazy?"
I know, it's nuts. And I'll tell you a story. This, obviously that's legal immigration. I'll tell you a story about illegal immigration. A friend of mine, he's a boxing referee, right? And what he does is he teaches referees 7 to 18.
Say that, now the phone is cutting out. He teaches what?
He teaches 11 to 18-year-olds, right? Boxer referees them. And anyway, they had a bit of an international competition a few months ago, right? And anyway, they were supposed to have 80 people who were going to come from Ghana, I think it was, right? So there were about 20 boxers. There was the train, the whole shaboodle.
Yeah.
Guess what? They landed at Heathrow, and all of them, within 24 hours, had disappeared.
Oh, imagine everyone's surprised. Robert, thank you very much indeed. I do want to get some other calls, but I'm going to take a break, and then we're going to be talking to Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform UK, about their thoughts on the migration figures and defection from former Tory Minister Andrea Jenkins as well. That's up next. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Drop it immediately, giving away sovereignty of a critical military base at a time when the world is becoming more unstable, more dangerous. China is trying to expand its sphere of influence. Giving away sovereignty over that base is a terrible idea. And as anyone knows, a lease is nothing like the same as sovereignty. A lease can be revoked at any time. So they should immediately, in my view, drop their ridiculous plans, which will make our ability to defend ourselves and our allies much, much more difficult.
Speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. For me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Just, by the way, some breaking news. The Australian Senate has just voted to have that ban on social media for children. This is something people are looking at here. We spoke about that with Catherine Birbal-Singh, the strictest head teacher in the country, yesterday. She's very much in favour of that. So that's going to put rocket boost under that story here in the UK as well. Philip Ingram is still with me, and no doubt he'll get your response to what my next guest had to say. He is Richard Tice. He's a Deputy Leader of Reform UK and one of their 5 sitting MPs, and he joins us just after that press conference in London today with Nigel Farage announcing that not only have Reform now reached 100,000 members, but also they've seen a defection of Dame Andrea Jenkyns, former Tory Minister and MP, to the party. Good afternoon to you, Richard.
Good afternoon. Yes, we're delighted to welcome a former Conservative MP, a former Minister, Andrea Jenkyns, who I've known and worked with on Brexit for 7 years, to Reform UK. And she's going to be our mayoral candidate for the mayoral election next May for Greater Lincolnshire. She is a suitable candidate. I remember when she was Education Minister, she decided once walking into Downing Street when journalists were calling out to her to put 2 fingers up to them. She'll be a fantastic candidate. She is very patriotic. She believes in Brexit. She believes in the great opportunities of this country. And I think she's spent much of her life growing up and representing county councils in Lincolnshire. So, yeah, she will be a great candidate for us. Sadly, not an actual MP. You're still on 5 MPs. You've seen other defections. We've seen people from local parties, councillors. We've seen some people from Conservative central office. But we know that at least one of your former sort of leading lights is very unhappy about these defections from the Tories. Ben Habib, who used to be in the job you're in now as Deputy Leader, he has said in the last few months that he has quit the party. He's concerned about the policies on Northern Ireland. He says that Nigel Farage is apathetic to the issue of the demographic changes in this country from mass immigration. He wants deportations as policy. He also says your party's not a democratic party. It's still technically a limited company entirely owned and controlled by Nigel Farage and not a democratic political party. What do you say to that? Well, that's the joy of free speech and democracy. Ben's entitled to his view, but his view is clearly not shared by the tens of thousands of people who are joining Reform. We actually had a vote at the conference to change the constitution, so that's going through with the Electoral Commission so that it is a fully membership-owned company limited by guarantee. So look, all of that change is happening. People are voting with their feet. We're getting great results in by-elections every Thursday. We won 2 just last week in Kent. We got great results in Scotland. So look, we're making huge progress. And the fact that we've now got former Tory MPs defecting to us and wanting to stand for us is a very significant factor. And you look at these immigration numbers. Well, I wanted to come to that, yes. Well, let's just come to that, because there is a massive misrepresentation of the reality. The reality is that these immigrations have gone up, not down, from the numbers we were told a year ago. A year ago, may I just remind you, we were told that net immigration was 672,000 to the year to June 23. Actually, they quietly, without telling us, Julia, increased the number, revised upwards to 906,000. Yeah. Almost 1 million people net amongst friends. So what various people are sort of pontificating as a fall, actually, by almost 250,000 people, they increased the number last year. And the particular concern a lot of us will have, and we've had this... we've had these numbers readjusted again and again, and the ONS has admitted it significantly understated immigration numbers. Its new figure is 1.3 million in terms of the actual number of people coming into the country. 866,000 net, not 685,000 net, as previously said. But it is quite extraordinary that they don't know how many people have come to the country, because I don't know about you, when I come into this country and I'm a British citizen, I have to actually show my passport. It gets scanned as a record of me returning to the country. When I have to go to another country, they scan my passport. People who come to this country have to fill out immigration forms. People who've got a legal right to be here, a visa, they have to fill out these forms. Surely the Home Office should know exactly who is in the country every single day of the year. It's a pretty basic thing. Yeah, check people coming in and check people going out. And just to put that huge upward revision in context, it's about a 35% increase in the net number that the ONS have put out there. And as I say, everybody is completely misrepresenting the reality of what's gone on here. They've tried to hide the increase. I think we can basically assume they've really got not much of an idea. It's a guesstimate, but it's a massive number, and you can genuinely sense it and feel it in towns and cities up and down the country. It just feels more crowded. The tubes, the trains, the roads feel more crowded. There's at least 1 million people net every year coming to this country. It's an increase in our population net by about 2.5% in the last 2 years alone. It's no surprise. You can't see a GP. You can't get a hospital appointment. Housing rents are surging. Nothing works. And guess what? Sadly, we're all getting poorer as a result.
Well, this is it. And Kemi Badenoch, the new leader of the Conservative Party, she's saying that we need to stop being so squeamish about talking about the cultural and the economic impacts of immigration. We've been told for years, and I know you and I too, the people have been saying we don't believe this is true, that there's a massive economic benefit to mass immigration. I mean, if there was, we would be doing a lot better now. We've had 20 years of mass immigration. You're one of the people, along with your boss, Nigel Farage, who's not been squeamish about talking about immigration. Why do you think the Tories have suddenly woken up to this issue? And do you think that they're actually likely to do anything about it? Your own leader said today the Tories did a terrible job, but he thinks Labour are going to be worse, by the way.
Well, I think just focus on people's track record. And the Tories, for election after election, said they were going to bring the immigration numbers down to the tens of thousands. And they deliberately, actively did exactly the opposite, created a pure open border policy to mass, cheap, low-skilled immigration that has suppressed British wages, reduced the quality of life, and made us all poor. So, no, I don't think anybody will trust the Conservatives under Kemi Badenoch. This is a lady who stood up in the House of Commons and celebrated the fact that immigration numbers had gone up a few years ago. So I don't think they'll trust them. And what we're saying to the British people is the only party you can trust to get down to net zero immigration, that's the only net zero we should have in this country, by the way, is Reform UK.
Just finally, I know you need to go, but just finally, what do you make of Ben Habib? You say the predecessor in your job as deputy leader of the party now left the party. He says he supports mass deportations in this country. Shouldn't we want to follow Donald Trump and basically, if someone's not here legally, not just channel boat migrants, but actually the 1 million plus people who are here, who came here legally but overstayed their visa or have no right to work, they came on a tourist visa, should we not be deporting those people if they've no right to be here?
Completely. We cannot accept people who are here illegally, and they must be deported, as historically they used to be. 20 years ago, we were deporting 40,000 people a year who were here illegally. So, yes, of course, those who are not here by legal methods need to be returned from where they came. They need to be deported. I know some people might get squeamish about the language, but actually that's the language that people up and down the country understand and recognise, and I think that's what the majority of the British people want to have. We want smart, lawful immigration, highly skilled, highly qualified, that can add genuine value to our country, that want to work here, integrate here, and, by the way, speak the lingo. Generally helps.
Richard Tice, MP, Deputy Leader for Reform UK, thank you for joining us. Philip Ingram, your response to all of that?
Well, no, I agree. We need to get into deporting people that are here illegally.
I don't know why people think this is a bad thing.
Yeah.
If I was in a country illegally, I would expect to be deported by that country. I don't know why people think that. They're criticising Donald Trump. Your right to life. Well, you've got a right to life and your family and privacy. You've got a right to that in your home country.
I think everyone who criticises deportation should then turn around and say they're going to offer one of the rooms in their houses to one of these illegal individuals in the country and look after them and pay for them for the rest of their lives. But then often these people are actually working. They're actually, but often again, not earning very much. That's because they're illegal. They're under the books. A bit off the books, under the radar. Under the radar. But again, they've not got any right to be here. And anyone who's doing that, by the way, is beating down wages for Brits and legal migrants here.
who are competing with them, you know, on the market. If you're working in the black market, you're not paying tax, no national insurance, you know, you're paid a low wage. Of course, you know, you're going to be bringing down wages for legitimate workers.
So you're not a net contributor. In any other country, you'd be deported from. You're deported from the United States. You're never allowed back again. So
that's an old-fashioned idea.
Yeah, we need to bring these sorts of rules in.
There's so much that the liberal hand-wringing brigade just are horrified by, which is just such blatant common sense to everybody else, isn't it?
Yeah.
12:36 is the time. I mean, there's just so much to talk about. I don't know how we're getting it all in. Up next, we are going to be talking to the former Foreign and Defence Secretary, Sir Malcolm Rifkin, about the Chagos Islands and whether or not Benjamin Netanyahu should face arrest if he came to this country. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. 12:39 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's speak right now to the former Foreign and Defence Secretary, Sir Malcolm Rifkin, who kindly joins us. Good afternoon to you, Sir Malcolm.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us. Two big stories I want to talk to you about. First, with the Chagos Islands. Big questions about this deal, which was announced, I mean, quite bizarrely last month, I thought, by Keir Starmer, that we were going to basically give the Chagos Islands to the Mauritians, who were totally ad hoc to the Chinese, but we'd had a 100-year lease deal for the Diego Garcia military base that the US hold that would protect that base's future for the time being. But lots of outcry about this. We're told the Americans are in favour of it. Now we know that Donald Trump and his team not in favour of this deal. They don't want it to go ahead. And now there's some talk of him trying to rush this deal through. But we've got another little bit of an issue, is that the Mauritian has elected a new Prime Minister who's not very keen on the deal. First of all, should we be giving the Chagos Islands to Mauritius? And secondly, is this a good deal for anyone apart from the Chinese?
Well, let me respond by what is the actual British interest. The British interest is not the Chagos Islands as such. Nobody lives on the Chagos Islands. They have no economic value that I'm aware of. What is important is the island, the one island of Diego Garcia, which has been a very, very important British naval base and which we've shared with the United States for many years. That was never recognized by Mauritius or by the international community. The deal that was negotiated, I have a lot of interest in. I mean, I have a lot of potential support for it, because in exchange for handing over these islands that have no economic value and nobody living on them, and they're of no interest to the UK, we were going to be given a 100-year guarantee of the future, and perhaps longer, but a minimum of 100 years, that the island of Diego Garcia would be recognized as being effectively British territory. And it's interesting, it wasn't just Britain that wanted to see this happen. There was a warm welcome from India. Now, a lot of people have said, oh, we're very worried about China. The fact is, India is the nearest neighbor to Diego Garcia. The Indians and the Chinese do not get on well with each other. The last thing India would have done would have been to welcome this proposal if it was going to help the Chinese interfere in that part of the world. So India was delighted that the presence of the base would be internationally recognized by Mauritius. Now, a lot's happened since then. I'm telling you where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
I thought it was. I still think it's basically a good deal, but I agree with you.
But I don't understand. We don't need the Mauritian government to recognise the Diego. So they have no claim to this island whatsoever.
No, sorry, you're wrong.
They've never ruled it.
No, forgive me. Before you go on saying that, that is fundamentally wrong. The islands, including Diego Garcia, were administered as part of Mauritius until Mauritius became independent.
By the French.
At that time, the British government said, we're going to hold on to these islands. I happen to think that was a justifiable decision. I'm not criticizing that decision. But don't say nobody agrees that it's nothing to do with Mauritius. The International Court of Justice, rightly or wrongly, had to judge on this and ruled the opposite to what you're saying.
I know they ruled the opposite, but I'm bow to your greater knowledge of this, but the Mauritians have never owned this island. It is a vast distance away from Mauritius, but there's also the issue...
Well, they're nearer Mauritius than they are to the United Kingdom, let's put it that way.
But that's not the basis on which island territories are controlled, is it?
But let me get
the key thing is, you say it's of no value, no one is it, but we know it's of value because it's where huge number of flights were carried out by military operations.
Or are you being interviewed?
No, Malcolm, but a huge number of military operations were carried out from Diego Garcia by the US.
Come to your question.
But you're saying...
What do you want me to answer?
Because I'm asking why you're saying it has no value when we know it has value because of the use of that base at Diego Garcia during military operations.
Forgive me, if you listen to what I was saying, I said the island of Diego Garcia has always had value, and that is the one that has been negotiated with a 100-year guarantee. Now, let me add something that I have not said up till now, because your program correctly pointed out that we now have the likelihood of a Trump administration. The Biden administration, the United American government, indicated publicly their support for what the British government had negotiated. The then Mauritian government was in favour. Both Mauritius and America now have new governments.
Yep.
And the Prime Minister of Mauritius, the new one, is saying he has severe reservations for the quite opposite reasons. He doesn't want Diego Garcia to continue as a British base. He wants the island of Diego Garcia to also be part of Mauritius. So he's saying he may be opposed to this. He hasn't yet made up his mind. And the Trump people are saying, we too have severe reservations. Now, if that turns out to be true, if these reservations are now there is no benefit in going forward with this proposal.
No, indeed. Do you think there's a likelihood, though, that the current Labour government here, Keir Starmer, can actually get this through before January the 20th and Donald Trump's
inauguration? Well, they mustn't try and do it, just rush it through in that way. That would be very, very foolish. Yeah. The only judgment that needs to be made is, will this have the support from the United States government that it's had up till now, and has at this moment, because the Biden administration are continuing to support it. Now, if Trump is very hostile, we don't yet know. The trouble with Trump is, you get odd sound bites, and don't really know what his position is going to be.
Yeah, and someone who's an ally, someone who's an appointee, but you don't know whether they're speaking on his behalf.
Well, it's more than an ally. I mean, Mario Cuomo is the designated Secretary of State. And he's got reservations. So these things have to be addressed. And if the discussions that Jonathan Powell, the Prime Minister's envoy, is having in the United States, they might reach agreement, they might not. If they don't reach agreement, that a Trump administration would be very severely critical. And if the new Mauritian government, for the opposite reasons, doesn't like the deal, better to drop it and continue as we were before.
It's going to be fascinating. Now, we're talking there about, this all comes from an International Criminal Court of Justice ruling some while ago. Let's talk about a more recent ruling from the International Criminal Court in relation to Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, and also his former Foreign Minister as well, now sacked. But basically demanding, putting out an arrest warrant for him for alleged genocide in Gaza of the Palestinian people. The current Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, has said he would have no choice under the terms as Britain as a signatory to the International Criminal Court to actually issue an arrest warrant, pass it on, to the authorities to deal with if Benjamin Netanyahu came onto British territory. We've seen a sort of different approach from Emmanuel Macron in France, although that seems to be sort of a little bit up in the air at the moment. Donald Trump has made it very clear that will not be the case for America. They're not a signatory to the court. Indeed, neither is Israel, actually. Should we issue an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu if he did step foot on British territory? Yes or no?
Well, I think, forgive me, I will not just say yes or no. I will give you a proper answer. I think that David Lammy is wrong. I think the British government do have a choice. Because the International Court of Justice is not a court that can enforce its judgments. It issues judgments. We try to respect them 99.9% of the time. Countries that are members do observe their rulings, and that is right and proper. But occasionally the circumstances are very, very different. And in my view, if you want my view, what the British government should be saying is it frankly depends on why Netanyahu wants to come to the United Kingdom. If he wants to come because it's part of a serious negotiating process to try and bring peace in Gaza, to try and make progress in the war between Israel and the Palestinians at the moment in Gaza, then frankly that is infinitely more important. That we do not interfere with that process. And if for some reason these negotiations should take place in London, which they've got to take place somewhere, I would say that then justifies saying we will not apply.
What if he wanted to come here on a shopping trip?
Well, that's exactly the point I was going to make. If it was for reasons purely of his own personal convenience, frankly, we respect the International Court of Justice. We are a signatory. Yes, we do. You may not, but we do.
I don't know if I do now. I think they've been captured.
Well, that's a matter of your personal view. But you're interviewing me, not the other way around. So as far as I'm concerned, the International Court of Justice does a lot of good work. We support most of what it has done. Occasionally we disagree with them. On this issue, I think there would be cause if the pointed issue was a negotiation towards peace being frustrated because Netanyahu couldn't come.
Okay.
But if he's coming for other reasons that are of no great significance of that kind, he must realise that is the risk he runs.
Yeah, I would find it extraordinary if we were to hand over a democratically elected ally. And again, the ICC is only supposed to have jurisdiction over countries, by the way, who are signatories, but also, I'm sure, of course, you'll know, Malcolm, countries where there couldn't be a possibility of any action being taken in their own country. And we know that we have a very independent judiciary in Israel. We know this because there's a former Prime Minister and President who were put in prison by that judiciary.
I'm not disagreeing with you on some of the points you've just made. I'm not defending. I don't think the warrant was necessary in the first place. I don't think it was justified.
But given that it has been.
Netanyahu or Gallant. But, very often courts which we normally respect issue judgments we don't terribly like. There was a precedent. It's a very important precedent that Britain was involved in because during the time of the IRA troubles, the IRA had 3 personnel in Gibraltar who had been identified by SAS. And they ended up being killed by the SAS, who suspected they were plotting to have a terrorist attack. It was taken to an international court, which found against the United Kingdom. We said, terribly sorry. You may have reached this verdict, but
we're not going to.
Our national security is at stake, and as far as we're concerned, this was justified behaviour. Okay. So there's an important precedent.
Very interesting. So, Malcolm Rifkin, I so appreciate your time. Thank you so much for talking to this really interesting debate there. Former Foreign and Defence Secretary, thank you for that. Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer. Should we issue an arrest warrant, hand over Benjamin Netanyahu if he came to our territory?
No, I don't think we should. I think we should. This is one where we turn around and say the court was wrong in issuing it. And we stand up as one of the permanent members of the Security Council of the United Nations and say we are not going to implement that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's absolutely outrageous. I know I don't trust that court's judgment. I think virtually all these international bodies have been captured by.
Very much so.
Let's call it what it is: anti-Semitic feeling.
Yes.
It's not pro-Palestinian. It's anti-Semitic. The only country they ever seem to have any problem with is Israel. They're really not bothered by anyone else. It really is. I think it's so blatant now. It's embarrassing. 12:50 is the time. Up next, going to talk about those gangs of beggars bothering you in the the street. Also, the latest on the MasterChef presenter Greg Wallace standing down, who are those who have been accusing him of making inappropriate sexual comments. I'll tell you up next. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
This isn't about whether the car makers can meet the targets this year, because they are very much on track. So they need to sell 18% EVs. They've been selling that year to date. This is about our industrial competitiveness. With the global market going electric, if we do not transition our automotive industry, we won't be competitive.
Smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. With me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just to let you know, obviously we announced a little bit earlier that MasterChef presenter Greg Wallace is stepping away from the hit show. We understand a number of women, 13 people, have accused him of making inappropriate sexual comments. Among them, former Newsnight host Kirsty Walk. It was very interesting, so we'll keep you up to date on any developments on that. Right now, let's talk about the bane of many people's lives, and that is the number of beggars, the gangs. It's organised criminals now now who are organising beggars, yes, you might see people who are quite clearly living on the streets, addicted to drugs or alcohol, who obviously need our help. I'm not quite sure giving them money to buy more drugs or alcohol is the answer in that scenario, but certainly an awful lot of the beggars we do see on our streets are simply organised criminals. Professional gangs are now running beggars junctions where they basically work in shifts to hassle drivers out of hundreds of pounds every day. Let's talk about this with Hamish Brown, MBE. He's a retired Scotland Yard Detective Inspector. Good afternoon to you, Hamish.
And hello to you, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Look, and everyone has noticed this, and there's nothing worse. You happen to have your windows down on a summer's day, and suddenly there's the squeegee merchants or the beggars at the traffic light. Particularly if you're a woman, I have to say I find that very, very intimidating. But
yeah, that's a really good point.
But this is happening on the streets. It's happening on public transport. It's happening outside shops. This is all. But most people don't realise these are organised criminals.
Yes, absolutely. And you made the point about being a woman. I could just imagine the situation. I was actually in a cab in Lanzarote at the beginning of the year, and a beggar came up and opened the back door.
Oh, my God.
Fancy, if a woman was sitting in the car and suddenly, if it was a man doing it, how intimidating that would be. I was quite frightened myself. Yeah. Yes, this is an ongoing problem. The law, the Vagrancy Act 1824, is back to the more years and years ago in the Industrial Revolution and what have you, and it hasn't really kept pace.
Yeah.
And you've got different type of beggars. You're quite right to mention the organised crime, the violence which go with it, people who don't give money to the beggars and are confronted, those who conveniently sit under cash machines or below cash machines to intimidate people into passing money, as opposed to, and let's face it, there are some very people in a sad situation out there, the homeless, and we particularly think about this at Christmas. That is a different category altogether. Yeah. And what I'd like to see is the Vagrancy Act repealed, and the last government was talking about doing something about it until suitable legislation came to mind, and no suitable legislation came to mind, so the old act is still there.
Yeah, I mean, so it is a crime to beg, but again, it's with intimidation a lot of the time. People don't realise when they give money. I've seen children on the London Underground as well being sent out to beg. It's organised. But if you give them money, you just encourage this. And people, if you're really worried about people who are homeless, you can give money to homeless charities and shelter and the like, and that's a much better way of spending your money and helping these people.
I think that's good advice, but what I want to say is a new law to come in to categorise the difference between people with the coffee cup out saying spares and cash, as opposed to the intimidation, and the sentences should be that being a deterrent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. That's a very good point to make. These are completely different things. Sorry, time is against us, but Hamish Brown, MBE, so appreciate you joining us, former Scotland Yard officer there. Philip Ingram, that would be welcome, wouldn't it?
Yeah, very welcome indeed. And you have to recognise that a large number of the individuals that have been pushed out to do this aggressive begging have been trafficked in, and therefore they have to bring the profits in, otherwise they get abused, and they get abused in other ways as well.
This lady who begs in my local high street, and she's got a picture. She's quite an old lady, but she's got a picture of a kid. She goes, "This is my daughter." I'm like, "Sorry, she's great. She's already a your daughter's a grandmother. You've been holding up the same picture for 18 years, and it was already a 20